Hello, check. Actually, check.
Hi, hello, good morning, everyone. Are you able to hear me properly?
Yes, sir.
Check. Mic check. Check.
Welcome back. Medicine has been taken as an elixir in disease treatment, but we should not forget that the compromised quality of medicine can jeopardize the public health. Respected guests, international speakers, national scientists, virtually connected audience, and my dear colleagues, a very good morning to you all. Namaste, I am Neelam Thakal, Research Officer at Nepal Health Research Council, and will be the MC of this session today. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all in this most awaited, first-time glorious event and an important session on pharmaceuticals entitled Strategies for Improving Quality of Medicines and Research in Pharmaceutical Sector. I hope this session will be very fruitful in enhancing medicine quality and pharmaceutical research in Nepal. To initiate the session, I would like to invite two renowned personalities of pharmaceutical field, Professor Dr. Panna Thapa sir and Mr. Bharat Bhattrai sir on the stage to jointly chair the session. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our respected chairs with a huge round of applause. Introducing Professor Dr. Panna Thapa sir. Professor Dr. Thapa is a founding member of Department of Pharmacy, Kathmandu University. His research expertise is in formulation and drug delivery, pharmacy practice and education, and regulatory sciences. He has received several national and international awards for his contribution to pharmacy practice and education. It's our honor to welcome you, sir. Similarly, I would like to introduce our next chair, Mr. Bharat Bhattrai, sir. Mr. Bhattrai is the Director General at Department of Drug Administration. He has over 26 years of experience in drug regulatory system with Ministry of Health and Population. He holds deep understanding of pharmaceutical regulatory environment in low and middle income countries. We are very pleased to welcome you, sir. For this session, we have presentations from national and international invitees. I would like to welcome our international invitees, Dr. Manish Mahajan sir, who is present with us virtually, and national invitees, Mr. Sudeep Pokhrel, Mr. Pradeep Lamsal, Mr. Ajut Thapa, and Dr. Praveen Prasad, who are present here. Please take your seat on the first row. We welcome you all to this session. The presentations will be followed by a panel discussion with the eminent personalities in pharmaceutical sectors, highlighting the major issues in medicine quality and pharmaceutical research in Nepal. Now, I would like to invite all the respected panelists on the stage. I would like to invite Mr. Balkrishna Khakurel sir on the stage. Mr. Khakurel has over 3 decades of experience in pharmaceutical sector, health commodities, regulations, and quality assurance. He has served for over 20 years in various capacities at Nepal's Ministry of Health system. I think he will join us shortly. Likewise, I request Professor Dr. Syamani Adhikari sir to take his seat on the stage. Professor Dr. Adhikari is an associate academician at Nepal Academy of Science and Technology. He has over 30 years of work experience in Ayurveda health service under the government of Nepal. Similarly, I would like to invite Mr. Pan Bahadur Chhetri sir on the stage. Mr. Chhetri is acting director of National Medicine Laboratory. He has more than decades of working experience in various government organizations under Ministry of Health and Population. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Projal Jang Pandey sir on this stage. Mr. Pandey is the president at Association of Pharmaceutical Producers of Nepal APON and Nepal Pharmacy Council. He has more than a decade of experience in leading the team of pharmaceuticals manufacturing and management. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Rajni Sake ma'am on this stage. Dr. Sake is an associate professor at Department of Pharmacy, Kathmandu University. She has served as the head of Department of Pharmacy KU for several years. Her research expertise is in medicines, bioavailability, and bioequivalence. Likewise, I would like to invite Mr. Rajendra Gewali sir on this stage. Dr. Gewali is an associate professor of pharmacognosy and phytochemistry at the Department of Pharmacy, Kathmandu University. His area of specialization is herbal medicine, formulation, product development, and phytochemical analysis. Similarly, I would like to request Mr. Santosh Kesi sir to take a seat on the stage. Mr. Kesi is the Senior Drug Administrator and spokesperson of Department of Drug Administration. He has a 2-decade-long experience in regulatory system and pharmaceutical service management in Nepal. Now, I would like to invite the moderator for the panel discussion session, Mr. Mehmet Anwar sir, to the stage. Mr. Mehmet Anwar sir is the area's regional director for promoting the quality of medicines plus program implemented by United States Pharmacopoeia and funded by USAID. He has years of experience in pharmaceutical health products and technology management in different international agencies for Asian countries. We welcome you, respected sir and ma'am. The floor will be open for discussion at the end of this session, so if you have any queries throughout the session, kindly put them at the end. Dear delegates and audience who are connected with us virtually, if you have any queries, kindly drop your comment on chat box and it will be discussed at the end of this session. Now with this, I would like to hand over the session to our respected chairs. Over to you, sir.
Very good morning. I would like to, on behalf of both the co-chairs, I'd like to thank organizers for the invitation to chair this session, Strategies for Improving Quality of Medicines and Research in the Pharmaceutical Sector. Without making much background, first we'll listen to the speakers, and then at the end of the speakers, after the three of them complete their presentation, we'll have a few questions from the audience. Or from ourselves as well, or if the panelists do have questions, they can ask questions. And then after that, we'll hand over it to the panelists, which will be moderated by Mehmet Anwar later on. Today's first, we have three presentations today. The pharmaceutical sector reforms for quality assured medicines, overcoming the SF medicines, challenges strengthening BAB in the local context, international trade in pharmaceutical research and development. And the first I would like to invite first presentation, the co-authored by Sudeep Pokhrel and Pradeep Lamsal. I don't know which one of them, both of you will be presenting or one of the anyway, let me introduce you first. Mr. Sudeep has about 2 decades of expertise in health system strengthening focused on governance and policy. Currently worked as a consultant at PQM Plus program implemented by USP with support from USAID. Mr. Pradeep Lamsal, technical advisor for regulatory systems strengthening at PQM Plus program implemented by USP with support from USAID. Both of them will be talking about pharmaceutical sectoral reform for quality assured medicines. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. Right at the outset, I would just like to thank, first of all, Department of Drug Administration and also the USAID PQM Plus project for giving me the opportunity to work in this, this very important agenda of pharmaceutical reform. I'm not a pharmaceutical expert by any means. I focus more on health policy and governance. And we basically started a sort of deliberation and a task to produce a reform paper to inform the policymakers on the importance of pharmaceutical sector reform, how important the sector is, and especially particularly to realize the constitutional aspiration of our country, and as well as to realize the universal healthcare agenda that we have espoused. So this presentation is actually a glimpse of the reform policy paper that has been produced. I think it's still in publication, if I'm not mistaken, which it'll be made public, I presume at some point in time. So very, very excited to be here, and with the permission of the chairs, please, who would like to begin? Thank you. So I will go through the presentation, but like I said, since I'm not a bona fide pharmaceutical expertise, so any difficult questions, I'll be deferring to Pradeep ji here, my co-presenter. Respected chairs, dignitaries, colleagues, friends. So I'll basically be talking about just a slide to introduce the pharmaceutical sector. And there are big 5 issues that we basically identified over the last 2-3 months that we've been sort of working on this assignment. And based on these big 5 issues, which need immediate attention, by the way, we've identified certain building blocks for reforming. And within these building blocks, we have certain reform priorities. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to sort of go into all the details, but I will, like I said, I'll definitely provide you a glimpse of what each of these reform areas that we've sort of covered. So if you just sort of look at the pharmaceutical sector in Nepal, officially it's as big as 60 billion, but there have been studies and there have been guesstimates that the actual market value of the pharmaceutical sector could be 2 or 3 times more than this. So it's a very prominent industry in Nepal. Currently, we have 72 allopathic companies producing, the 72 companies producing allopathic medicines and 48 producing Ayurvedic medicines that are registered with the DDA. And currently, they're able to meet 45% of the total demand, the internal demand, domestic demand. But if they were to operate in a full potential, there are estimates that they could meet up to 70% of at least the medicines in a solid doses form. So it's a growing sector. It's a very important sector here. It employs around 25,000 pharmaceutical professionals in both public and private sector. I think more than 15,000 of them are already registered. It has 20,000 different brands, and we have 400 companies registered for importing drugs in Nepal. So just to give you the size here. But interestingly, despite this size, if we were to look at sort of the trend of the budget that's been allocated to the national regulatory authorities, which is the DDA and National Medicine Laboratory predominantly, we see that it hovers around only 0.5% of the total Ministry of Health budget. So the budget that's allocated to regulate this growing sector, a big sector, one of the prominent industries, it's very minuscule by comparison. So with that introduction, so what are these big 5 issues that I just mentioned? One's definitely the self-reliance. Big reform is required to make the Nepal's pharmaceutical sector self-reliant and resilient also. Quality assurance and regulation, there are a lot of lapses and gaps, and which requires a lot of reform across the board. Institutional restructuring is an important agenda, and especially now that the country has gone into federalism, the pharmacy sector, especially the national regulatory authorities, have not really been sort of restructured to make them in alignment with the federal form of government. So that's, again, a very important reform agenda. And another is research and innovation. R&D is an important component, and unfortunately, we've not sort of seen the growth in the R&D within the domestic industry. So to spur this innovation, which will ultimately also contribute to make the pharmaceutical sector self-reliant, significant reforms are required. So that we've identified that as one of the 5 key reform issues. And another is definitely the strategic position of the pharma sector. So let me just give you just a couple of key takeaway points across all these big issues. So if we talk about self-reliance, what we see in Nepal is that there's a heavy reliance on foreign imports. 70% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients are imported from India and 30% from China. So we're completely dependent on foreign imports. But if you dig a bit deep down, what we see is Nepal is able to export a lot of crude materials to both India and China. So we export the crude materials, they process it as a raw material, and then we import it back into the country. So there is a huge potential also here to produce the raw materials here. So that's one key aspect that we need to explore if we were to make the sector self-reliant. And also what we saw during COVID-19 was that it exposed vulnerabilities in the pharma sector. The sector was not able to sort of respond adequately to the needs for various reasons, from ongoing lockdowns to the availability of energy and so forth. There are weaknesses that we need to sort of look into and try to sort of rectify if we were to make the sector self-reliant. That's another point. And another point is there may be a possibility, again, this is more of a hypothesis at this particular point in time, so by no means I'm saying that Gavi is going to be pulling out in future. But if it does, we are mostly dependent on Gavi finance and Gavi supplied vaccines. But if that is the case, if Gavi pulls out, for example, once the country graduates into middle-income country status, then the domestic industry will really have to step up to fulfill that gap. And it has to be self-reliant in vaccinations. I think we already produce animal vaccines and some certain injectables, so I think we need to sort of build upon that existing capacity. So that's, again, a very important point to make this sector self-reliant here. And another of these issues is quality assurance and regulation. So the regulatory authorities, both DDA and NML, are severely limited in capacity and resources. These range from human resources, financial resources. I already talked about the budget scenario, which is not adequate given the size of the pharmaceutical sector that it needs to sort of regulate and promote. And there are also inconsistent pricing policies that has led to considerable price variation. I think a particular study that was conducted a couple of years ago found that there is as much as 200% price variation between the minimum and maximum price of the, among the same generic products. So that's a huge price variation, and it's going unchecked, which is a worrying sign. There is a weak vigilance, market vigilance, leading to rise in substandard and falsified pharma products. Especially there is a lot of cross-border movement of these substandard products that needs to be checked. And there are also fragmented legal and policy instruments. I think there are about 19 or 20 key policy provisions that guide the pharma sector, but these are sort of fragmented, maybe too strong a word, but they're dispersed among 5 or 6 different sectors, including health, industry, Ministry of Home Affairs, and so forth. So while it's very important to maintain that multi-sectoral approach when it comes to regulation, but there also has to be some effort made to streamline these legal instruments or policy instruments. So that's another issue when it comes to quality assurance. And 3 types of pharmaceutical products, the health technology products, nutraceuticals, and medicinal cosmetics. They pretty much operate outside the purview of the government. These are not regulated at all. Like I said, the institutional restructuring is another important criteria. So both DDA and NML are yet to be restructured and aligned according to the aspiration of federalism and the Constitution. And there are critical gaps. If you really look deep into the unbundling report of the government or the assignment of functions across the 3 tiers of the government, you see that, from a scientific perspective or from a public health perspective, you see a lot of gaps. One particular gap, for example, is that the current assignment of function gives the authority of setting the minimum prices to palikas, which may not be optimum, because you may end up with a situation where you have 753 variation in prices of the same drug. So I think there's a high time that that you also do some sort of a functional analysis. And this actually goes across the whole public health sector, not only pharmaceutical sector, but nevertheless, these critical gaps are there. So we need to also sort of look at the existing functional analysis. Maybe this is the opportune time that we've had 5 years of federalism being put into practice with the new rounds of elections now coming soon. So maybe this is the time to sort of do some, introspection and see what's working, what's not working, and how do you sort of readjust these functions across the 3 tiers of the government. So, the lack of innovation, like I said, and R&D limits the capacity of local manufacturers to produce high-value branded medicines. Well, I'm not discounting the value of generic products, but I think there has to be a balance between producing the same type of generic medicine and also producing high-value medicine. And that balance we've not been able to sort of strike that balance, primarily because of the lack of R&D in the sector, which of course leads to the poor product diversification in the domestic industry. And like I said, also a couple of slides ago, self-reliance is not possible. If we're not going to invest significantly in innovation and R&D.
Can you wrap it up in 2 minutes, please?
Thank you. So strategic positioning is one of the big issues. So if you look at the national discourse, and I'm certainly part of these national discourse because I primarily focus on health policies, and I've been part of this discourse for the last 15, 20 years. The pharma sector's role in achieving the national health goals and universal health care is often overlooked. It's not getting the due attention that it deserves. Whereas, we found out from the result of the recently concluded national health accounts that, while in Nepal, we have 58% of share of the current health spending comes from out-of-pocket payments, which is very, very high. But if you break down that 58%, we see that the cost of medicines constitute the largest component. So that just gives you an idea of the importance of, reforming the pharmaceutical sector if you were to achieve the vision of, equitable access to quality health care. And also, the priorities are not given or accorded, not enough priorities are accorded to promote the pharmaceutical industry as a commercially viable industry contributing to national economy. So we also need to position pharmaceutical sector as one of the key industries in Nepal. So to address this issue, these 5 issues, we sort of came up with 7 building blocks, and if you look at them, they look suspiciously like WHO's building blocks for health system strengthening, and we did that deliberately, so it's easier for decision makers and public health professionals across the board to sort of understand. So, Chair, if you allow me a couple of minutes more, I can sort of just quickly go through the highlights of these building blocks. Thank you. So first among these building blocks is policy coherence and harmonization. What does that really mean? That means I think we need to update a lot of the legal and policy instruments. I talked about the fragmented nature of these instruments being positioned across different sectors, but also there are some policies that are outdated. I think WHO recommends that the country sort of revisit its national medicine policy every 5 years, but we haven't done it since 1995, right? So 95 was the last iteration, so it's seriously outdated. So we need to sort of look at that. And there is, again, a very important aspect of, balancing the function of government being a regulator and a steward. What does that really mean? I think if you were to sort of break it down, yes, of course, we need to promote government as an enforcer. It regulates the sector at large, it assures quality, but it should also be an enabler. Provide a carrot together with a stick, if you will. Which means that it's going to provide incentives in creating enabling environment, particularly to foster innovation and R&D and sort of, spur the production of new high-value drugs and so forth. And also to store confidence into the domestic industry. It should also establish itself as a major purchaser. The government should be a major purchaser of the domestic industry. Another facet here is the local manufacturing promotion. I've already sort of talked about that. One particular feature here is to make the low-cost raw materials available for the manufacturer. Government can play a very important diplomatic kind of a role there to do this. And also, it should be the role of the government to protect the interest of the domestic industry. HR, I don't really need to talk about. I think HR is a issue that the whole health sector faces. In reform, another important point here is on the reform priorities is the institutional governance. Like I said, functional analysis of the pharma sector is very much required, and reorganizing functions and restructures according to the aspirations of federalism, particularly by balancing between what functions to delegate, what to deconcentrate, and what to devolve. I think that kind of serious exercise we've not done with the pharma sector, so that needs to be done immediately. Pharmaceutical services are often overshadowed, often overlooked rather, where we need to focus on also providing drug information and impart consumer education. There's an important issue of rational use of drugs. Safeguarding consumer rights is an important area. And tech and innovation, I've sort of already talked about, where you can promote both radical as well as incremental innovations and adopt modern technology to improve efficiency across the industry here. Thank you so much. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Sudeep Pokhrelji and Pradeep Lamsalji for this session. Wonderful session. And most of the things are covered to be discussed in the panel and other participants. For the next session, I would like to request Mr. Achyut Thapa. He is a technical advisor for chemistry, manufacturing and control at PQM Plus program implemented by United States Pharmacopoeia with support from USAID. And Dr. Praveen Prasad. Dr. Praveen is a young medical doctor working as an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Pharmacology at Maharajganj Medical Campus, Tribhuvan University. The topic for this session being overcoming SF medicines, medicine challenges and strengthening BABE in the local context. And I would like to request to start the session and finish it within the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Co-chairs, both co-chairs of the session, panelist, moderator, and our distinguished guest. Thank you for this opportunity to present on behalf of PQM Plus for the activities that we are undergoing and we have conducted on substandard and falsified medicines, along with the future about bioavailability and bioequivalence studies. I am Achyut Bikram Thapa, Technical Advisor for PQM Plus, and along with me, I have Dr. Pradmin Prasad, Assistant Professor for Maharajganj Medical College. So I'll be dealing much more on substandard and falsified medicines, along with the introductory portion on bioavailability and bioequivalence. That will be followed by Dr. Praveen on the concept of bioavailability and bioequivalence in Nepal. So, talking about substandard medicines, the medicines that doesn't meet the standards are substandards. The standards may be with respect to quality, safety, and efficacy parameters, and overall, in overall scenario, it can be called as out of specification products. And another part is the falsified medicines. They are deliberately and intentionally not meeting the requirements, and they are fraudulent in nature, and that may or may not contain the product at all, or may be tampered with another product with no efficacy at all, or which may have adverse effect. So the result of substandard and falsified medicines may be correlated with the poor governance, weak regulatory mechanisms, surveillance and monitoring system, a part of which previously Sudeep has covered. These all are the parameters, these all are the factors that are supporting for the availability of substandard and falsified medicines in the product. And populations with limited access to the safe and quality medicines, especially for LMIC's countries like Nepal, all the people, the low people with the under marginalized people, they are highly vulnerable for these medicines, for substandard and falsified medicines. And these medicines fail to treat the disease. These medicines, substandard and falsified medicines, they contribute for antimicrobial resistance and thereby elongating the course therapy, and sometimes it may even fail to treat the disease. And there is a waste of resources, and there is the major part of substandard and falsified medicine is the lack of confidence in the patient and the healthcare providers. The patient will not adhere to the system, the patient will not adhere to the medication, so there will be a lack of belief in the system. And the final is the healthcare provider. All the healthcare provider will have no belief in the system. So ultimately, these will result to the lack of productivity, and this will add healthcare expenses, especially for our countries like LMIC's countries. So this will add increased healthcare loss. So these are the recent cases of falsified medicines. These are cases from 2019 to till now. Within last 3 to 4 years, this is the worldwide falsified problems. It is not limited to high value products. It starts with low value products like hydrochlorothiazide to vitamin A capsules, and it extends up to high-end molecules like vaccines and anti-rabies serum. And recently, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, remdesivir injection was one of the highly falsified product, followed by COVID-19 vaccines. All COVID-19 vaccines, starting from Pfizer to AstraZeneca to Covishield, they were falsified in different parts of globe, starting from Iran, India, Uganda, and Myanmar, and other countries as well. So this is the case of one of the falsified medicines, falsified COVID-19 vaccine that was encountered in Iran. The seal of original vaccine was tempered and it was filled with normal saline, and that was the case reported to WHO. And along with these, there are a bunch of medicines having falsified categories, starting from the blue pill called as Viagra. That was one of the most falsified medicine available in the worldwide market. So Nepal is not apart from this story of falsified medicine. This was also available in Nepal during the COVID-19. The drug ceftriaxone was deliberately mislabeled with remdesivir injection, and this was available during the COVID time, high peak time of COVID wave in Nepal. So, talking about substandard medicines in Nepal, there were a couple of studies conducted by NHRC itself. It was on back 2015 and again in 2019. Both of these studies, it showed that Nepal is one of the country having a problem in substandard and falsified medicines. WHO calls for about 10% of substandard and falsified medicines in the market, and the prevalence of SF medicine in Nepali market is much more higher than the limit, than the international data provided by WHO for LMICs. It was even around 40%, and recent studies on 2019, it was even higher, around 15 to 18% of the medicines available in market was substandard. So following this intervention, we require a prominent mechanism that can curb with the substandard and falsified medicines available in the market. So one of the approach for this would be bioavailability and bioequivalence studies. Bioequivalence studies would provide that the medicines that we are using or that we are manufacturing in Nepal meets the standard of international standard or meets the standard that of innovator product. So linking this product, substandard and falsified medicines towards bioavailability and bioequivalence, I would like to jump on bioavailability and bioequivalence section. So talking about bioavailability, whenever we are taking any oral medication, it is disintegrated inside our body, and then only a fraction of it will be available to our systemic circulation. So the time and area under curve, rate and extent of product available in our systemic circulation is bioavailability. That is a well-known fact. So whenever we are talking about two different brands, let's say one is innovator, another is comparator product. So another is generic product that we are manufacturing. What will happen if we are comparing these two products? Are they going to give us the same concentration in the same time, and that will have the same area under the curve? That is a big question, and that is the area where we need to study the bioequivalence studies. We need to study the proper bioavailability of the first product, and we can compare the bioequivalence with our product, that is generic product. So if it is within the acceptable limit for all three parameters, then we can call it safe and effective, and that can be taken as bioequivalent, and that will have similar effect to our body. So why is bioequivalence required? Bioequivalence is required for drug development process, and that is also a legal requirement under Medicine Registration Guidance 2073. MRG 2073 calls for product registration only with bioequivalence study, especially for BCS class 2 and class 4 products and specialized products like pellets and modified release products. So if we want to establish interchangeability, moving to the generic prescription, we require bioequivalence studies, and ultimately bioequivalence study will support us for the data quality, reliability, and self-sufficiency. This figure of 10% of annual government expenditure on medicine purchase, so that we need to be much more focused on the quality of products that we are procuring, so that the patient, the end user, get the quality of product. So with this, I would like to call Dr. Praveen for the strategies and for the road map towards bike balance in Nepal. Over to you, Praveen. Thank you.
Thank you, Achyut sir. Respected chairs, panels, different delegates, as well as the stakeholders present in the hall. A very warm good morning to all of you. So with your permission, I would like to continue the presentation further. So if we talk about the bioequivalence in Nepal, I know it's not changing. Okay. If we talk about the bioequivalence studies in Nepal, there are multiple stakeholders that we need to identify. Of the multiple stakeholders, the four major stakeholders that we would like to emphasize here is appropriate legal framework. If we talk about the scenario of Nepal, the Drug Act of Nepal, in the section 31, it has some provision for the clinical trial, but still it's a long way to go. Other than that, there are several government institutions like Ministry of Health and Population, Department of Drug Administration, as well as the Nepal Health Research Council have their specific role to play. And without them, the continuation of bioequivalence would not be possible. Other than that, we have pharmaceutical industries as well as the contract research organizations. Talking about the contract research organizations, it has to provide different services like clinical services, lab services, the team of human resources, as well as the documentation team. So, if we talk about the bioequivalence studies in Nepal, there are different academic institutes like Kathmandu University, as well as the BP Koirala Institute of Health Science in Dharan that have conducted bioequivalence study. But they have conducted them in the strength of the academic study. And we at Maharajat Military Campus would like to take it a step further to address the regulatory requirement. So talking about the strength, weakness, opportunities and threats of Maharajat Military Campus as a clinical research organization for bioequivalence study, we have enlisted some of the points and I would like to walk you through them. So talking about the strength, we have an institutional ownership. Besides, we are interested and determined to establish ourselves as a contract research organization for bioequivalence center. We have been continually working with Department of Drug Administration for the last 4 years. We have trained and we are training our different relevant human resources for this purpose. We have functional therapeutic drug monitoring laboratory and a dedicated clinical area set up for the bioequivalence studies. Similarly, the opportunities. So if we talk about the opportunities, one of the biggest opportunities that we have is we have the opportunity, we have a good relationship with all the different stakeholders. We have a good relationship with pharmaceutical industry, with the regulators, with the ethical and Nepal Health Research Council and so forth. So we have a collaborating opportunities with the academic institutions in Nepal and abroad. We have an opportunity to collaborate with the government institutions like ministry, like NHRC, as well as the Department of Drug Administration. We have an opportunity to collaborate with non-government organizations in Nepal, and we have an opportunity to collaborate with research organizations present within the country as well as outside the country. Besides that, when pharmaceutical companies, they started to approach us to conduct bioequivalence study at our center, that gives us lots and lots of positive vibes. But still, our journey has not been smooth. We have lots and lots of problems, and those challenges, as a weakness, we have a limited financial support. It's a big investment that requires, and we have not been able to secure that. Additionally, the whatever budget has been allotted would not be implemented effectively, which was due to the twists and turns in the administrative as well as the procurement processes. And other than that, we have a limited number of human resources dedicated for this particular activity. We have some threats, like we need to get our services accredited to meet the global requirement as well as the regulatory requirement, because whatever report we will be producing, it will be submitted to the regulatory bodies and we have to get their approvals. So how do we move forward then? So we plan to move forward and develop ourselves as an autonomous center. We would like to start as a bioequivalence center and progress towards the establishment of Center of Excellence in Clinical Pharmacology. We would like, for this, to achieve this goal, we would like to conduct several capacity building activities as well as strengthening of different aspects of contract research organization activities. we would like to get accredited to different global standards, especially to begin with WHO pre-qualification standards. And to achieve all these goals, we need to collaborate with different stakeholders, and we are really open for all the possible collaborations. So before I conclude, we have a long list of people who we would like to acknowledge. However, there are few pertinent people that we cannot miss. We would like to acknowledge Professor Dr. Debya Singsa, Dean of Institute of Medicine, and her family. We would like to acknowledge the contributions of Professor Dr. Arjun Lamichhane, Campus Chief of Maharajganj Medical Campus. We would like to acknowledge our Director General, Sir, of Department of Drug Administration, Mr. Bharat Bhattrai, and his team, which is efficiently led by our Dr. Santosh Kesi, Sir, Shivani Khadgi, ma'am, as well as Mr. Sailesh Jha, Sir, and Mr. Shiva Bhattrai, Sir. So if there are any queries, I and Mr. Achyut would like to answer them at our best of our abilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen and Achyut. It was a nice presentation. The last presentation will be from Dr. Manish Mahajan. Dr. Mahajan is Medical Affairs Lead for BU Biologics, Zydus Life Sciences. He is alumni of AIIMS Delhi and has more than a decade and a half years experience in the pharmaceuticals domains of clinical and translational research, medical affairs, and pharmacovigilance. I think he's in, is he in online? Yeah? Yeah, he will be speaking on international trend in pharmaceutical research and development. Over to Dr. Mahajan, please.
Thank you, respected chairperson. Let me begin by thanking the organizing committee of NHRC for inviting me for this talk. I would also like to, thank all the delegates, all the respected panel members, and also all the people who have joined this wonderful congregation discussing about pharmaceuticals and way forward. And I think before I deliver the talk, my expectation is that I will be learning a lot of things about the upcoming public policies in Nepal and across the world, which will also enable me as an individual. So let me begin my session by deliberating on the talk on international trends on pharmaceutical R&D, and maybe these are certain points which are commonly known to most of us. But what I will touch upon is certain key points which every policymaker, every entrepreneur should keep in mind before thinking about the R&D, especially in the pharmaceuticals. So coming on to this slide, it's a very interesting slide. And when we talk about pharmaceutical R&D, and we know about the R&D expenditure in various other industry sectors, including technology, hardware, software, semiconductors, and pharmaceutical, you will be surprising to know that when we talk about the percentage spent of the net revenues is one of the highest in the pharmaceutical R&D, which is close to 90%. And if you talk about the upcoming thing like software and semiconductors or technology hardware, they're quite low compared to that of pharmaceuticals. So one of the key important point which I want to bring it forward that pharmaceutical R&D is quite a capex as well as impex oriented industry. Talking about the new drug approvals, the kind of therapies are changing, and the kind of modality in terms of pharmaceuticals from the small molecules, the things are now being worried on biologicals, and you will be surprising to know that the share of the new biological applicants and the approvals are increasing across the world. So that is one key point that yes, the investment in pharmaceuticals will now be more towards these biologicals. Also, also want to bring it a very important point that the drug development now doesn't see the blockbusters; they see the niche busters in terms of indications which are not in terms of volumes, but in terms of quite a scientific rigor in terms of orphan drug designation, rare indications, highly personalized medicines. These are the ones which are going to take forward for the pharmaceutical world across the world. Talking again, when we talk about the R&D spending and the new drug approval, yes, R&D, as I told you, is quite an intensive thing in the pharmaceuticals. Also, very important is R&D spending is very, it's a kind of a circle, and lot of not only the in terms of infrastructures are important, but also in terms of skilled researchers, and those are very important for building the R&D capacity for any of the pharmaceutical which someone wants to develop anywhere across the world. And that is the one which is close to 90 billion was spent in US alone in 2019. So that's the scale which the R&Ds are working across the world. Coming to the therapeutic categories, again, very important is that what pharmaceuticals are looking out are the blockbuster drugs. And when we talk about the number of approvals to the value which have been generated. So, for example, oncology, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases, they are the ones which uh, you know uh, takes the major pie of the revenues, and as well as in terms of R&D spending also. So these are the very important risk segments. As we know that the the lifespan of the human resource is increasing, and as the lifespan increases, the chronic diseases, oncology, those becomes the key therapy areas where R&D needs to focus, and has been focusing across various segments. And also very important, we find that segments like pain, mental health, gastrointestinal product, viral hepatitis, antihypertensive, and especially those kind of diseases which the LMICs are mostly dwelling with. Are You can see that the retail spending in these therapies have been reducing. One of the important aspect of retail spending is also introduction of the generics. We all know that once the generic drug is introduced in the market, there is a big price splash, and then the overall spending is reduced in terms of retail spending for the drug. Now, bringing those key factors, what influences R&D spending? Very important is that the industry all is looking for profits, and very important is that these profits, depend not only calculates the amount of money spent in developing the product, but also depends upon overall global revenue of the product, which is both marketing as well as manufacturing cost, and also the demand, the important curve of demand and supply. Very important that when the anticipation of the future drug profit is higher, the companies invest more in R&D and vice versa. Now, when we talk about in terms of anticipated revenues, very important again is that the expectations are informed by the prices and sales volume observed for existing drug in various markets. So while anyone invests in R&D, R&D is a very global thing. People and industries inspecting in R&D should not think about their own geography, but also think about how this the drug or a solution which someone is providing on should cater to most of the population across the world. And that is very important, because that is going to add a scale as well as volume to the profits. Now, coming to the cost of the new drug, there has been various studies in terms of how much cost, but very important is that around overall 12% is the actual number of drug which reaches the market after phase one study. However, if we encompass or include the overall preclinical development or development in the laboratory, then the ratio is around maybe 1,000:1. So out of those 1,000 leads which someone generates, probably one of those drugs may be able to reach the preclinical stage. And so in nutshell, we all know that R&D in a pharmaceutical is a risky proposition. And along with that, uh, you know, the organizations, they look out not only in terms of the revenues, but also they look out for the revenue also further helps in the future development of the organization, and that keeps the organizations viable as well. It is not that a single blockbuster product or a niche blockbuster product is going to drive a particular organization. The organization has to reinvest into building a robust pipeline to keep the organization and industry alive. In terms of, we all know, in terms of the total R&D cost, as per the recent estimate, is somewhere around zero point 0.8 billion to 2.3 billion of the R&D. Again, depends upon the kind of indication. As I discussed earlier, that R&Ds are looking out for niche segments, because these niche segments, there is a lot of government supports in orphan drug development because of the waiver of certain clinical trial, certain phases of clinical trial. Also, the clinical trials have lesser sample size. The cost of the clinical trial reduces. Also, there are a lot of other incentives which the policyholders provide for developing in the R&D for an orphan drug designate product. So very important that when we talk about how this cost in R&D for pharmaceutical has been behaving, it has been seen that there is a gradual increase every year by around 8.5%. So that's an incremental R&D cost which is with the organizations are seeing, that is year on year. And keeping those risky proposition in mind, we all know that it's again becoming a big problem area for all the R&D organizations. And one of the important is the costly clinical trials. Clinical trials have been becoming more and more costly. Regulators are becoming rightly more and more intensive in terms of data. So that is something which no one can forego and has to expect that while investing in any of these R&D ventures. Very important is the tax structure. I mean, that is again very, very important that what R&D organizations are also looking out for is the certain benefits in tax. There across the geographies, the governments as well as the policyholders, they are providing tax credits, direct as well as incentivizing those R&D initiatives, thereby making organizations as well as making the R&D as a very lucrative segment within the organizations. Talking about policies, there are certain areas where people are looking out for in terms of market exclusivity. These are certain areas where every organization think about while entering into any of these geography. What is the policy for generic drugs, biosimilars? What are the tax intensive? Also, in terms of the regulatory policies, the extent of clinical trials involved, or what are the vaccination policies, and very important, which most of the we all of you know forget, is the human capital investment, and that's one of the key areas, because at the end of the day, the human capital investment is very, very important for a successful R&D venture. Uh, Talking about, as you all know, in terms of clinical trials, clinical trial is again within the overall, as I was telling you, the overall expenditure in the R&D, which is, as I told you, depends from zero point 0.8 to 2 billion USD. Around more than 50% of that cost goes to the clinical trials itself, and that is one of the the key area of spend within that R&D, and that is again going to increase and increase as many of the policymakers, they are not harmonized to ICH GCP, and people are working across that. People don't need to redo the clinical trials, and more countries and more regulators to join the ICH GCP consortium, so that a trial done in one of the ICH GCP can be applicable to the other ICH country, and if at all there is no as such a pharmacogenetic profile change in the different human capital. With this, I would also like to summarize that when we are talking about pharmaceutical R&D, it's a resource intensive industry, and pharmaceuticals need to earn profits so that it can reinvest back into in developing their future pipelines, making their organization as well as people at large benefit from these benefits of different drugs which are coming across. And we also know that as the science is evolving, a lot more pathways are being unfolded. The precision medicine and nucleic acid-based treatment to genetic treatment, all those will become a very, very order of the day. And this would require a help, a kind of a win-win situations, not only for the policymakers, but also for the consumers, patient population, as well as the pharmaceutical organizations at large. I would like to end and summarize with a with a very important saying that the policy decision makers need to foster policies that nurture spirit as well as culture of innovation. We have seen across. It's not about the size of economy. It's not the size of the geography. It is the culture of innovation in the R&D, whether it is related to pharmaceutical or IT or any of the segments which we are looking out for. With this, I would like to conclude and I will be open for all the comments. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Mahajan. It was quite interesting. Before we move to the panel discussion, if you have, we'll allow you 3 questions each presentation. If you do not have, then we can ask during the panel discussion as well if you feel like it. If you have a pertinent questions, one question is to, please, Professor Karke.
Hello? Well, all 3 presentations were excellent. They covered the various issues. My question, for the first speaker, Mr. Sudip Pokhrel, is, well, you mentioned HR issue has less importance, but sectoral reform requires the input of specific professional service and practice. What is your suggestion about the urgent need of promoting health system pharmacy practice in Nepal? That is the first question for the first speaker. And the second question is about the second speaker, Mr. Praveen Prasad. Well, of course, Drug Act of Nepal, gives entirely focus on quality, safety, and effectiveness. What is your recommendation about the need of incorporating the factor related to economic burden in Drugs Act? Because you already mentioned something about it. And for the third speaker, Mr. Manish Mahajan, I have very simple questions. Well, you have established or you got the permissions for establishing BAB study processes. What activities you have taken on BAB in your institutions since its establishment? And second question, have you got the legal recognition for this process? Otherwise, it will be difficult for the government to recognize the recommendation from your laboratory. Thank you.
Who is responding? Please.
Thank you. Sorry if I give the impression that the HR issue is. Sorry if I gave the impression. Sorry if I gave the impression that the HR issue was not important. That's not what I meant. I simply skipped through that point because HR issue is very well an issue and it plagues the whole sector. So for the sake of time, I simply sort of didn't elaborate. On your question with regards to what needs to be done, I think from my point of view of being more focused on health policy, public policy, I think what's definitely required is skill mix. The O&M survey needs to be done. I think the current law that regulates or governs the HR is very, very old. 38 साल हैन 38 सालको ल जस्तो लाग्छ भनेपछि एउटा ओएन सर्भे नै गर्नु पर्यो अनि अघि मैले पनि भने त्यो फेडरलिजममा जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ गइसकेपछि हाम्रो रिस्ट्रक्चर भएको छैन so we will need to do that. Pradeep, do you have anything else to add to that? So his question is more what needs to be done, what suggestions?
Yes, thank you very much. Second speak, Achyut, yeah.
Thank you, Shiva sir, for your question. And it was covered about quality, safety, and efficacy well in the Drug Act. And regarding the pricing control, it is much more controlled by Drug Advisory Committee. So there is different mechanism that controls the pricing issues. And I think that answers your questions.
Okay, thank you. There was a adjoining question with BAB's kind of thing.
Regarding BAB, was that question to Mahajan or with us? Yeah, he was mentioning to Mahajan.
Okay, you can still add on if you like, otherwise we'll move to Dr. Mahajan.
So, I'd like to call Dr. Praveen for this one, about the status of BAB studies at Maharan's Medical College. Okay.
No, rather than that, what he was, Professor Karki was referring is, what is your specific recommendations?
Yeah.
Am I right? Okay, do you want to add on with BAB? You have recommended that we need to have an autonomous center, accredited center in the nation, and so on. So, do you want to add more than that, or?
Yeah.
Can I go to the mic, please?
Hello. Okay. So thank you, Karki sir, for the question. Actually, we had a little bit confusion whether the question was for Mahajan sir or for us. Talking about our achievements, what we have done. So we have exposed ourselves to the functioning bioequivalence centers in our neighboring countries. We have procured liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, and we are in the process of developing methods for development of tests for that. And in our future plans, we have a objective to get our legal recognition as well as the accreditation of the lab. So we are working on that, and if we have a sufficient amount of, if we have a sufficient collaborators, we probably will achieve this target in the upcoming fiscal year.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. We got the message. Dr. Mahajan, is he online?
Can you hear me?
Could you respond to the question, please?
I think that question was not for me. I think the question was whether they have registered their BABA for with the Nepal Health Regulatory Authority. I think that was the question.
Anyway, did you hear anything, Dr. Karki? Or do you want to add specifically to Dr. Mahajan?
Views about the process of the implementation of the Drug Act, and in fact we are expecting a lot of data related to the problems, and we couldn't get the proper data presented here regarding whether it was about the promotion of the health system pharmacy practice, its quality and its effectiveness. That also we didn't get the answer, and even in the presentation, and the presentation also lagged about the sufficient data related to all the three species. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mahajan, as well. I think Dr. Karki was referring to something else. With this, because of time constraint, we will not be able to take more questions. However, we have got a panel discussions where you can throw your questions directly to them later on. Before handing over to the panel discussion moderator, Mr. Anwar, I would like to request my co-chair, because he has got another schedule to move. So if you want to add on something, please add on, and you can leave.
Thank you very much, Dr. Panna. And actually, it was a really good presentation throughout. And regarding this policy paper and reforming Nepalese pharma sector, the paper presented was quite good. म अलिकति नेपालीमै बोलौँ किनभने हाम्रो औषधि व्यवस्था विभाग वर्षौँदेखि चाहिँ हाम्रो नीति कार्यक्रमदेखि लिएर अन्य कुराहरू चाहिँ इन्कर्पोरेट भएन बिचमा। त्यसका लागि हामी धेरै कुराहरूमा पछाडि छौँ। त्यसकारण यो फोरमबाट यो प्यानलिस्टहरूबाट चाहिँ अबको वे फरवर्ड के हुनसक्छ, भोलिको दिनमा हामीले के गर्न सक्छौँ, यी चिजहरूको लागि ती कुराहरू चाहिँ आइदियोस् भन्ने म चाहन्छु। र तपाईँहरूले गरेको रिकमेन्डेसन चाहिँ भोलि गएर इम्प्लिमेन्ट गर्ने अवस्थामा पुगेको अवस्थामा चाहिँ हामीले पक्कै पनि यो कुराहरूलाई फड्को मार्न सक्छौँ। र हामीले औषधि व्यवस्था विभाग चाहिँ एज सच चाहिँ हामीले पुरै नै रिफर्म गर्नुपर्ने अवस्थामा हामी पुगेका छौँ। चाहे त्यो जनशक्तिको कुरामा होस्, चाहे अन्य पोलिसी इन्कर्पोरेट गर्ने कुराहरूमा होस्, या अन्य कुराहरूमा। यसको अलावा जुन नेपालको स्वास्थ्य प्रणालीले चाहिँ एउटा इन्भिजन गरेको छ, युएचसीदेखि लिएर एसटिजीसम्मको कुरा, आउट अफ पकेट एक्सपेन्डिचरका कुराहरू, यी सबै कुराहरूलाई गर्नलाई र रेगुलेटरी स्ट्रेन्थनिङ गर्नलाई हामीलाई चाहिने आवश्यक कुराहरू, एचआरका कुरा, त्यस्तै बजेटका कुरा पनि आए भन्दाखेरि यी सबै कुराहरूलाई चाहिँ हामीले कसरी स्ट्रङली चाहिँ लबिङ गरेर चाहिँ हामीले अगाडि बढ्न सक्छौँ भन्ने कुरा यो फोरमबाट चाहिँ यसरी रिकमेन्ड भएर आएको खण्डमा हामीलाई भोलिको दिनमा पनि हाम्रा एभिन्युजहरू खोल्नलाई सहज हुन्थ्यो। धन्यवाद। मैले यति भन्दै अर्को एउटा मेरो काम विशेषले गर्दा म बिदा लिन चाहन्छु यहाँहरूबाट, र यो फोरमले राम्रो एउटा रिकमेन्ड दियोस् भन्ने म आशा गर्दछु। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Bharatji. Now, I would like to hand over this mic to Mr. Anwar for moderating the panel discussion. May I request you, please give them, we started 20 minutes late, so we'll add in 20 minutes more right from here. We'll go up to half one. So let them to speak for 3 minutes. They can ventilate their thoughts, and then we'll take questions from, it will be better to have more questions from downstairs than from the upstreams.
I think I would better go to the dais. Thank you. Well, respected chair and panel members, my fellow presenters, colleagues from different sector of pharmaceutical or health sector colleagues, first of all, on behalf of this session organizer, I welcome you all. And I landed last night, and this morning I was given this assignment that I would have to moderate this session, particularly with the panel members. So I'm really grateful for all of them to come here and they participate. So now I was initially, when I was thinking about this session, I was thinking that it's like 5 minutes per panel member. But Dr. Panna, he has already reduced it to 3 minutes. So my apologies for that one. Maybe you won't be able to reflect so much, but I would request all of you to be conscious of the time. So in this next, you can say 20 to 30 minutes, we are going to cover 5 areas. We are going to talk about issues related to substandard and falsified medicine in Nepal, and what can be done in order to strengthen the systems around that. We will also talk about strategies for improving medicine quality in Nepal. We will also talk about strategies for strengthening bioavailability and bioequivalence in Nepal. And then present status of pharmaceutical research and development is, of course, high on the agenda. We also got a presentation from our fellow colleague in India, exploring barriers, opportunities, and need of reform in pharmaceutical sector. We will also talk about it. I would request all panelists to touch upon those things for at least 1 minute. And then at the end, we will definitely, as one of respected colleague from audience, he highlighted that there is a gap in presentation about the way forward, what can be done. So we will also briefly touch upon that at the end. So first I will go to Dr. Balkrishna and Pan Bhadri Chetri. Sir, I would like to quickly, like in 2 to 3 minutes, if you can reflect upon that what are the issues, related to substandard and falsified medicine, and then what can be done in order to improve the quality of essential medicine. Essential medicine in Nepal, what would be the National Medicine Laboratory role, or what would be the regulatory authority role in order to strengthen the good manufacturing practices and good distribution practices. So over to you, Dr. Balkrishna, and then after that, Dr. Pan Bahadur Chetri. Let me give you the mic, I think.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Anwar, for this night. As for the issue of substandard, SF medicine, very rampant. Everybody knows that. So my suggestion to address the issue of SF would be to strengthen local manufacturing. So, which is, everybody knows, which is growing, which is a good happening in a sense. Pharmaceutical development and analytical development should go hand in hand. It should be taken simultaneously. So, the trend is pharmaceutical development first, and then we go for analytical development. So we really rely on pharmacopoeia for the analytical part. So which is not really addressing the issue of substandard drugs. So if we want to address SF in the long term, my suggestion here would be to take analytical parts simultaneously along with the pharmaceutical development. I hope it is. The message is taken by the industry sector. So the other thing to do to address SF would be to strengthen local manufacturing, particularly the life-saving drugs. So the example that you have shown in the presentation, so many of them, they are sort of essential and life-saving in nature. So what people tend to do, counterfeit, is more on those things, so where there is a gap. So domestic industries are not manufacturing, so the need is there, the need has to be met by any means. So in that, there will be a gap, so the counterfeiters, they come into the picture. They come and close this gap. So the government, I think the government, when they identified life-saving drugs and essential medicines, so they should at the same time think of a strategy, what can be done to address the issue of these substandard drugs. SF is really a burning issue. We simply do not know what we are taking, what patient in the bed is taking, what people in the ICU are, taking. So it's a big issue. So government, at least to start with, they should start giving subsidy to local the domestic industries for the production of key essential, particularly the life-saving drugs. So if we start from there, so that way we can address the gap, and there will be hardly any place for the SF to come into the picture. So rather than focusing on testing obviously it can identify, but we have done enough. So we know what is there in the market. So it's already been identified, but what is the solution now? So we need to go for the solution part. So solution for a longer term would be to strengthen domestic industries and also to look into analytical development. So my another suggestion in the policy level would be, means the drug policy which has come in 1995. So it has identified, it has given the whole thrust of the policy is the self-reliance, 80%, long time ago. But then now we never measure. We never measure. It's a big policy statement, but we hardly measure where we stand with respect to production capacity and what sort of need we have met. So I think the research has to be continued on the policy based on the indicators and based on the priority, means industry, what the industry is already meeting, and what are the gaps, and how can we address those gaps? So there has to be a package. So, and also from WHO perspective, WHO, since last couple of years ago, they have a interagency, agreement on the local production, which is called local production agreement, I think. So, so under that, they are committed to provide technical collaboration and technical technology transfer. So the government and the industry, I think they should be aligned, and they should be asking WHO for enabling environment for the technology transfer.
Thank
so
you.
Many countries are doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Balakrishnan.
Yeah, you can name it. Just give example. For example, Molnupiravir, manufactured by MSD, I think. So which is been sub-licensed to 27 countries. Why Nepal is behind? And the whole African region, South Africa is taking a lead under MPP for the manufacture of mRNA COVID vaccine. So yeah. There are already, in the global community is already committed. So only thing that we need action on our part. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Krishna. Dr. Pan Bahadur, being, head of National Quality Control Lab.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Mohammed. So if you allow, I'll be speaking in Nepali, okay? It's fine? Okay. So first you talk about the falsified and the counterfeit drug, no?
Like issue of quality assurance, and what's the role of lab, National Medicine Laboratory, how they can contribute through controlling, through their systems to control the issue of substandard and falsified medicine in Nepal.
Okay, thank you very much. सबभन्दा पहिले त म यहाँ के भन्छु भने अब यो नेसनल ड्रग कन्ट्रोल ल्याबोरेटरीको रूपमा अब राष्ट्रिय औषधि प्रयोगशाला चाहिँ रहेको छ। अब यसको अब ऐनले नै यसको चाहिँ व्यवस्था गरेको छ। हाम्रो जुन चाहिँ औषधि ऐन 2035 छ, त्यो औषधि ऐनमा दफा 6 मा यो राष्ट्रिय औषधि प्रयोगशाला नेपाल सरकारको एउटा चाहिँ प्रमुख अङ्गको रूपमा चाहिँ रहेको छ। र यसको मुख्य काम नै मान्छे ड्रग टेस्टिङ गर्ने हो, पोस्ट मार्केटिङ सर्भिलेन्स गर्ने, यी सबै कामहरू यसको चाहिँ रहेको छ। र यहाँ जहाँसम्म यहाँले चाहिँ भन्नुभयो यो फल्सिफाइड अथवा चाहिँ काउन्टरफिट, मलाई चाहिँ के लाग्छ भने मैले यो मेरो चाहिँ 26 वर्षको चाहिँ 26-27 वर्षको दौरानमा अब केही चाहिँ औषधिहरू चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ मार्केटिङ सर्वे गर्दाखेरि मलाई चाहिँ वी माइट ह्याभ फाउन्ड सम सब स्ट्यान्डर्ड ड्रग्स, तर चाहिँ फल्सिफाइडको चाहिँ केस हेर्ने भनेदेखि इट्स अ भेरी रेयर। जुन केसमा हामीले चाहिँ अरू कन्ट्रीहरूमा जस्तो चाहिँ अब 2-3% चाहिँ फल्सिफाइड भनेर चाहिँ पाउँछौँ, त्यो अब दो वी हेभ अ भेरी ओपन बोर्डर विथ इन्डिया, तर चाहिँ द केसेस अफ फल्सिफाइड प्रोडक्ट्स इज भेरी रेयर। जस्तो एउटा केस अहिले भर्खरै चाहिँ हाम्रो अघि यहाँले चाहिँ प्रस्तुति गर्नु चाहिँ विराटनगर भेटियो, त्यस्तै सो लङ ब्याक धेरै चाहिँ समय अगाडि चाहिँ सायद एउटा चाहिँ सिप्रोफ्लोक्सासिन भन्ने ट्याब्लेट चाहिँ त्यो त्यस्तो चाहिँ भेटेको थियो। र अब नत्र भने फल्सिफाइड प्रोडक्ट्सहरू चाहिँ खासै त्यति चाहिँ नेपालको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ इट्स नट अ सिरियस इस्यु भनेर भन्छु म चाहिँ। र जहाँसम्म चाहिँ अब क्वालिटी कन्ट्रोलको कुराहरू छ, अब वी आर वर्किङ अलोङ विथ मैले चाहिँ डिडिए एन्ड चाहिँ डिडिएसँग चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ सँगै काम गरिरहेको छौँ, किनभने चाहिँ बोथ अफ वी आर दि पार्ट अफ द रेगुलेटरी अथोरिटी हो। र त्यसकारण चाहिँ अब मार्केटमा द्याट वी डु आवर चाहिँ सर्वे, र अहिलेसम्म हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ जनरली चाहिँ अब अहिलेसम्मको ट्रेन्ड यसो हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ 10% जति हामीले चाहिँ टेस्ट गरेका छौँ, 10% जति चाहिँ सब स्ट्यान्डर्ड ड्रग्सहरू चाहिँ हामीले पाएका छौँ। र त्यसमा चाहिँ रेगुलेटरी एक्सन गर्ने जिम्मेवारी चाहिँ औषधि व्यवस्था विभागको हो. That what we find in our analysis, we speak on yes or no. हैन, हाम्रो चाहिँ पार्ट भनेको यो एनिमलको पार्ट भनेको yes or no मा ठिक छ या छैन. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pan Bahadur. Now I will quickly go to Dr. Santosh and Dr. Parjwal. Like my question, and I would request both of you to just take quickly 2 minutes and reflect upon that. What are the strategies that we can adopt in Nepal to improve the medicine quality? You know, starting from that, what role a manufacturing side can play and what role regulatory side can play in order to ensure the quality of products, or quality of pharmaceutical products in Nepal, which is the basic right of the population in Nepal. So first, Prajwal, over to you, and then maybe Santosh, I will come back to you.
Thank you so much, the team. I wouldn't like to take much of his time to announce the name, so I'll just go to the topic first. First of all, thank you for this time for me to speak something about the pharmaceutical development in Nepal, in case of, particularly for the pharmaceutical industry's perspective. Look, we have some kind of challenges that we have already discussed in many ways. For example, we have a lot of challenges in competition in generic drugs. We have a lot of challenges in kind of falsified, a very rare but substandard mechanism that we cannot control or regulate in a way that it is. The third is too many brands. Too many brands. This has already been in the policy paper, already been published, more than 20,000 brands operated in Nepal. The countries with a very minimum population, almost 2.5 to 3 million residing populations. So almost more than 70% of the healthcare system has been run by the private sector in the holistic health system. And that is also a truth. Also in the health budget, the DDA gets a very low budgetary support, I think below than 0.5% of the support. That definitely reflects the system and that way we are operating. And pharmaceutical industry is not also a part of that. We are within the system. So basically, we are far ahead and far departed from many of the things that we could make it happen in a very short period of time. For example, quality manufacturing processes, in case of GMP, in case of good pharmacy practices, we are a little far and we are not catching up to the, what you call that league. And definitely we have a lot of problems, lot of gaps in case of regulatory framework, in case of strengthening the quality practices. So ultimately, there are 3 or 4 things that we have to look into. First is strengthening the regulatory system. That's for sure, we all agree on that. Even the pharmaceutical manufacturing development purely depends on the regulatory strengthening. The way that they could govern, they can facilitate, they can act as a friend for the industry to promote, they regulate, they timely inspect, they give us a lot of advice and everything. So a regulatory body cannot operate in isolations also. Industry in one way, regulatory in other way, health system is in other way, and government policy in other way. We have a drug policy in line, and we have to implement all those drug policies what are written one by one, and we have to implement the strategy. Nepal don't have any problem in making the strategy. We have a major problem in implementing those strategy that we already drafted 5 years ago. We already have very beautifully crafted policies we had. For example, 2051, we already declared from the national level that 80% of essential drugs should be manufactured and prioritized to the national industries. That has not been implemented so far. Government has already prioritized the small thing and the basic things. And the Nepalese manufacturers are also in line, and we are really try to welcome those kind of implementation part, and we are also ready to implement that part from our perspective. And other one is, for example, animal. The study is here. And as for the dog, that animal is for the research laboratory, not for the regulators, what you call that, regular laboratory practice. No, it is meant for the research. and what kind of support that NML can provide to the industry or any kind of product manufacturer, that they can develop the method, they can give us the support that the Nepalese industry can grow in one way or other. So third point could be the advantage that Hakulil sir already mentioned, that WTO advantage for the least developed countries. We can manufacture new molecule, patent molecule that the Bangladesh has been already been adapting and getting the advantages. Fourth is definitely a practices. Manufacturer has governance with the GMP practices, but beyond that sector, beyond that company, there are a lot of other components in the pharmacy practice as well, where you have to have a good dispensing practices. We have a lot of pharmacies, more than 30,000 pharmacies operating, and it has not been regulated as per the standards. And the quality of dispensing products, quality of delivery of the services has not been as accurate, not accurate as per the requirement of the system. So that will definitely deteriorate our value, our norms, our service delivery part as per the pharmacy practice as well. Or HR part as well, we didn't have that kind of, what do you call that, placement up to the health post level of system, where pharmacists can widely practices their good practices, and they can deliver a good service at the end of the day. So these are few of the things, and we don't talk about much things about the research, clinical CROs. CROs should be independent. It is an independent body, and that will operate, which will definitely a post-marketing service is required for BAB, that's fine. It's very, very good things that we have to do. And for Nepal, what we need, reform of the policy, that's fine. Implementation is a major challenge to us. Third is the innovations, research for newer delivery techniques. Newer delivery techniques, हामीले अझ बढी innovation गर्न सक्यो भने चाहिँ राम्रो हुन्छ. अर्को third and final one is the linkage between industry and academic research. Academic research, if you can link industry, we can come up with more newer delivery system or a new molecule in days to come. So ultimately, any nation, we can name any nation in the world without improvising the quality and without promoting the national industries. There is no other way out that we can control, we can improvise, and we can rebuild a system where we can ensure the better delivery system in case of pharmaceutical system. So ultimate point, as being a manufacturer as well, I would rather say two major points. One is strengthening the national industries for essential drug, life-saving drug, wherever is required for the country. Second one is a good practices in pharmacies where there is a bigger role of pharmacists up to the tertiary level of healthcare system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Santosh, you want to come here? Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm very much happy to be here today for this panel discussion. All are respected here, so I'm here. So this is the first time, I think, after maybe more than 40 years, we are talking about reforming the pharmaceutical sector. So it would be better if there are some participants from the Ministry of Health and Population also. We should tell them what are the gaps, where we are, and what are the reforms actually we need. Whenever we are talking about the medicine, it covers at around 40 to 45% in any healthcare system. But still, the structure of the Department of Drug Administration, as we are talking now, the structure, the infrastructure, the resources, everything is not as per the work or whatever the activity assigned by the Drug Act. So, without functioning Department of Drug Administration or without functioning regulatory authority, we cannot assure the quality of the medicine. That is one of the things. And well-functioning regulatory authority is definitely one of the indicator of the availability of the quality medicine within the system. So we have very long ago enacted Drug Act also. It is in the process of revision. We are in the process of revision. We have a very old drug policy also. So in the regulatory framework also, it doesn't cover all the aspect of the health system which has to be covered. So these are the things. So we have to start from the policy. We have to start from the regulatory framework. And definitely there should be the good cooperation, good coordination among the industries as well as the regulators. So regulators and the industries are the mirror of the countries for the pharmaceutical development. Regulators cannot be the stringent without the development of the pharmaceutical industry. So we should think how we can promote those pharmaceutical industries. As ex-Director General, Mr. Khakurel sir already highlighted what we can do. There are a lot of scope for the pharmaceutical development because we have a TRIPS waiver. There is a lot of scope of the technology transfer, and with the recent pandemic of this COVID-19, there are other scope for the vaccine development, biologicals, monoclonal antibodies, and others. So for all those, we need a strong collaboration, cooperation with other pharmaceutical industries, research institutions. So they need to invest in the quality infrastructure, and also need to invest on the technology also. If they can import the technology from outside, so because pharmaceutical industry is all the technology based. If we adopt the technology, there are a lot of good example of the different countries. We can see different emerging countries has been done very well in the pharmaceutical development. Even the Bangladesh is one of the example for us. So we should go together, investment in the infrastructure, investment in the technology, and collaboration with the academia, regulators, and the industry is the only way to go forward. Once again, I would like to thank for giving me this opportunity to speak a little bit on about this policy reform and everything. So I would like to thank the chairperson as well as the organizing committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Very important points you raised, and Purjwal, you too. So, like one of important point that you discussed about research and, criticality of bioavailability and bioequivalence. So I will just quickly go to Dr. Rajni Shakia. So if she can reflect upon, strategies for strengthening bioavailability and bioequivalence in Nepal, and what's the current status and what can be done.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we had a very good presentations. I have also seen few papers that substandard and falsified medicine is a bit common in Nepal. Panbadur sir, his statement is a little bit different from that, but it may different from studies to study. One of the study which was conducted by NHRC a couple of years back, I guess, it reported around 30% of the medications which was included in that study, they were found to be falsified, substandard, right? So I guess there are, we can find a few such cases. Identification of such type of problem is very crucial because that can lead to a patient's healthcare problem. It will increase cost of healthcare. And to identify those problems, detection, qualitative and quantitative detection is very important. And well, our laboratories are doing quite good thing in that regard. And also, in the same context, bioequivalence and bioavailability study, that also has important role. Well, it is not a new concept in our country. Kathmandu University Department of Pharmacy, we started it more than a decade back. It started in 2006. Nepal Pharmaceutical Laboratory, it supported, the company supported us by providing equipment and establishing the lab. We did bioequivalence study with a few molecules as well at that time. But after some time, we couldn't continue that work. There are several reasons behind that. Financial problem, I don't think so. Our companies are not that much, they have problem in this thing, but maybe lack of confidence on academic institution, or I don't know what is the reason behind that. We try to continue that process. Still, we are continuing. We are reviving our lab. We are hopeful in this regard. And I'm glad to hear that at Maharajganj campus, the lab is running well. We have heard about that. Well, in case of this thing, bioequivalence, bioavailability studies, the main problem is, I think, is, there is no strict regulation. regulatory imposing is not there. It is still an option for pharma companies. Nobody wants to spend that much money if it is not compulsory. But we all know, in our heart, we know that bioequivalence study, bioavailability study is very essential. It is not essential for all group of medicine, but there are a few categories of medicine, like those who have poor dissolution, who have nonlinear pharmacokinetics, who have narrow therapeutic index, etc., etc. There are some medication for which this type of study is very essential. And now we should not make further delay in this thing. And for this, I think first step is to, start with some guiding document, national guiding document. That is very important. Department of Drug Administration might be thinking of preparing the document. And also, there should be monitoring whether that category of medication has the pharmacokinetic data available or not before marketing. That is very important. And next thing is, I would like to again emphasize, which our chairman of Nepal Pharmacy Council have already mentioned, there is a dire need of this industry and academia collaboration. We still do have that gap in between us. In developed country, I mean the countries where pharma field has been developed or prospered, there we can see very good connection, collaboration between industry and academia, which we still are lacking. We are working, pharma company is quite generous to academia. I do not know about others, but for Kathmandu University, they are quite generous. They are helping us with our students' issue. But in this research part, we are still lagging behind. But now it's high time to start this thing. Without collaborating, I don't think research will prosper, neither in the company nor in the academia. Because academia, we do have good brains, we have a good bunch of people who can, who are quite innovative, have good ideas, but there is crunch of resource. We do not have that much fund to do good work. We are doing, but still, if we can get fund, it would have been much better. Whereas in case of pharma, there might be lack of human resource for who can do good research work. So if you can collaborate, then both of the sector can prosper. So this is the main thing I would like to say over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajani. Thank you very much. And speaking about research and development, may I ask Dr. Adhikari and also Dr. Rajendra Gyanwali if they can quickly reflect upon the current status of pharmaceutical research and development in Nepal, particularly in terms of pharmaceuticals. So your thoughts and what should be the way forward. Over to you. Dr. Adhikari, you first, and then Dr. Gajanan.
Thank you very much, respected chair and all the panelists and all the audience. Can I speak in Nepali? Nepali में भन्न चाहन्छु र म यहाँ के छ भने औषधि भन्ने बित्तिकै अथवा मेडिसिन भन्ने बित्तिकै एलोप्याथिक, डाक्टर भन्ने बित्तिकै एलोप्याथिक, स्वास्थ्य संस्था भन्ने बित्तिकै एलोप्याथिक, सबै कुरा त्यस्तो भएको बेलामा म खास गरेर आयुर्वेदसँग बिलङ गर्छु। त्यसैले र हजारौं वर्षदेखि अथवा सभ्यताको प्रारम्भदेखि नै यी औषधिहरू जसको स्रोत हामीकोमा छ, जडीबुटीहरू भनौँ र अन्य पनि स्रोतहरू हामीसँग छ र यहाँ औषधिहरू पनि तयार भइराखेको छ र इन्डस्ट्रियल स्केलमा पनि आयुर्वेद औषधिहरू बनिराखेका छन्। र हामीले जब औषधिको कुरा गर्दाखेरि
गुणस्तरीय, चाहे त्यो आयुर्वेदको होस् या एलोप्याथीको होस् या अन्य कुनै पनि प्रणालीको गुणस्तरीय हुनुपर्छ भन्ने कुरामा कति पनि शङ्का छैन, हुनैपर्छ 100%। तर के छ भने अरू अथवा खास गरेर एलोप्याथिक औषधिहरूको भन्दा आयुर्वेदको चाहिँ के फरक छ भन्दा एलोप्याथिक औषधिको र मेटेरियलहरू आफै तयार भएर आएको हुन्छ र त्यसलाई मात्रै हाम्रो इन्डस्ट्रीहरूमा रिप्रेजेन्ट गर्ने, फेरि त्यसलाई चाहिँ प्रस्तुत गर्ने मात्रै हो, त्यसलाई यहाँ बनाइराख्नु पर्दैन। आयुर्वेदको हकमा के छ भने यहाँ उत्पादन पनि गर्नुपर्छ, र मेटेरियल पनि तिनीहरूको कलेक्सन गर्नुपर्छ, तिनीहरूको भण्डारण गर्नुपर्छ, तिनीहरूलाई प्रयोगमा ल्याउनुभन्दा अगाडि पनि थुप्रै स्टेजहरू हुन्छ र तिनीहरूलाई बनाउने इन्डस्ट्रीमा आइसकेपछि हुन त आयुर्वेदको हकमा चाहिँ जस्तो एलोप्याथीको हकमा के छ भने आफ्नै मेडिकेसन आफ्नै लागि औषधि बनाउने भन्ने चाहिँ सामान्यतया हुँदैन, किनभने तयारी औषधिहरू आउँछन्, र मेटेरियल पनि त्यस्तै हुन्छ। आयुर्वेदको चाहिँ सेल्फ मेडिकेसन पनि हुन्छ र घरको लागि, समाजको लागि या हस्पिटलमा पनि आफ्नै फार्मेसीहरू बनाउनु अति आवश्यक छ आयुर्वेदको हकमा। जबसम्म हामी केही यस्ता औषधिहरू केही फर्मुलेसनहरू छन् तुरुन्तै बनाएर आज बनाएर अथवा अहिले 1 घन्टामै प्रयोग गर्नुपर्ने, तिनीहरूको पनि गुणस्तर चाहिँ हुनैपर्छ। जबसम्म गुणस्तर हुँदैन अरू औषधिमा जस्तै आयुर्वेद या कुनै पनि औषधिमा त्यसको सेफ्टी र एफिकेसी अथवा त्यसको प्रभावकारिता हुन सक्दैन र त्यो सुरक्षित हुन सक्दैन। त्यसैले औषधि भन्ने बित्तिकै प्रभावकारी हुनु पर्यो, सुरक्षित हुनु पर्यो र एफोर्ड गर्न सक्ने अरू कुराहरू सबै लागू हुन्छ। तर यसमा चाहिँ खास गरेर अलिकति बढी ध्यान दिनुपर्ने कच्चा पदार्थमा र निर्माण प्रक्रियामा पनि अहिले केही बढी ध्यान दिनुपर्ने छ। यसमा मैले साथै छोटो समयमा, किनभने यो सेक्टरबाट म बोल्दैछु, 1-2 मिनट बढी लाग्यो भने है अनुमति दिनुहोला भन्ने अपेक्षा गर्दै, यहाँ के छ भने हिजो उद्घाटन सत्रमा प्लानिङ कमिसनको हाम्रो सदस्यज्यूले पनि भन्नुभएको थियो कि हामी मात्रै परनिर्भर हुने किसिमले र मेटेरियलमा होस् अथवा औषधिमा र हामीसँग भएको ज्ञान, हामीसँग भएको सिप, हामीसँग भएको सम्पदाको सदुपयोग गर्ने पक्षमा चाहिँ हामी पछाडि नपरौँ है। अब चाहिँ पोलिसी सिफ्ट पनि हेल्थ रिसर्चमा जस्तै गरेर मेडिसिनको सेक्टरमा पनि यो एकदमै इन्टरडिपेन्डेन्ट हो, यसमा पनि अलिकति पोलिसी सिफ्ट पनि गर्नुपर्ने हो कि त्यो बारे पनि सुझाव दिनुहोस् है भनेर उहाँले भन्नुभएको थियो। वास्तवमा उहाँले सँगसँगै स्वास्थ्यको साथसाथै इकोनोमिक, यो सामाजिक स्वास्थ्य, मानसिक स्वास्थ्य, शारीरिक स्वास्थ्य, यसको साथसाथै आर्थिक स्वास्थ्यको पनि कुरा गर्नुभएको थियो। अथवा राज्यले नै लिएको, हाम्रो राष्ट्रले नै गोल के लिएको छ त भन्दा स्वस्थ र समृद्ध नागरिक बनाउने भन्ने। हरेक सरकारले स्वास्थ्यको साथसाथै समृद्धि पनि आवश्यक छ, त्यसमा समेत ज्यादै ठुलो योगदान दिन सक्ने यो आयुर्वेद सेक्टरको कसरी उन्नयन गर्न सकिन्छ, यसका औषधिहरूलाई कसरी गुणस्तरीय बनाउने, अझ यसको प्रयोगमा शङ्का गरिन्छ, किन भन्दा यसको गुणस्तरमा शङ्का गरिन्छ, गुणस्तरीय छ कि छैन भन्ने बारेमा। यसको उत्पादन गर्दाखेरि गुड म्यानुफ्याक्चरिङ प्र्याक्टिस या जिएमपीको कुरा आउँछ, अङ्ग्रेजीमा शब्दावली भए तापनि जसरी बनाउनुपर्छ त्यसरी बनाउने, जे गर्नु हुँदैन त्यो नगर्ने, त्यही नै होला जिएमपी भनेको। के हुनुपर्छ त्यो गर्ने, जसरी बनाउनुपर्छ प्रोसेसिङ म्यानुफ्याक्चरिङ प्र्याक्टिस भनेको आयुर्वेदमा चाहिँ मुख्यतः यो 6-7वटा कुरामा ध्यान दिएको छ औषधिमा। म त्यसलाई भन्छु कि पहिला त वेल आइडेन्टिफाइड हुनु पर्यो र मेटेरियल, समस्या त्यहाँ पनि छ। अहिले मैले त्यसको अरू लामो व्याख्या गर्न सक्दिनँ, यो एकदमै छोटो समयमा मैले 1-2 मिनट थप पनि मागेको छु। त्यसको र मेटेरियल प्रकृति,
in interest of time, you know, like few final thoughts from your
त्यसको
side.
गुण कस्तो हुनुपर्छ, त्यसलाई कसरी भण्डारण गर्नुपर्छ, कसरी सङ्कलन गर्नुपर्छ, यी यावत कुराहरूमा चाहिँ हामीले अध्ययन गर्नुपर्ने छ, रिसर्च भनौँ, अनुसन्धान गर्नुपर्ने छ। अहिले हाम्रा प्र्याक्टिसहरू के कस्ता भइराखेका छन्। समस्या सबभन्दा ठुलो के छ भन्दा औषधिको नाममा, खास गरेर आयुर्वेद औषधिको नाममा फुटपाथमा होस् अथवा कुनै पनि ठाउँमा यो आयुर्वेद औषधि भनेर जोसुकैले त्यस सम्बन्धी ज्ञान नभएकाहरू अथवा ज्ञान नभए तापनि मैले जानेको छु भन्ने ओभर कन्फिडेन्स भएका अन्य पद्धतिका वरिष्ठ चिकित्सकहरू समेत आयुर्वेद औषधिको बारेमा कमेन्ट गर्नुहुन्छ, तर त्यसको सही किसिमले र मेटेरियल भएको छ कि छैन, उत्पादन सही किसिमले भएको छ कि छैन, त्यसको प्रयोग कस्तो अवस्थामा गर्ने भन्ने बारेको सही ज्ञान छ कि छैन, त्यो बारेमा चाहिँ अध्ययन पनि गर्नुपर्ने छ र त्यसमा धेरै शङ्कास्पद कुराहरू छन्। त्यसमा चाहिँ अनुसन्धान गरेर यसलाई क्वालिटीको बनाउनै पर्छ र यसलाई चाहिँ प्राथमिकता दिएर यो राष्ट्रको आयमा, रोजगारी सिर्जनामा, बसाइसराईका समस्या समाधानदेखि लिएर हरेक दृष्टिले हाम्रो आर्थिक स्वास्थ्य समेत, व्यक्तिगत र राष्ट्रको आर्थिक स्वास्थ्यमा समेत तिनीहरूले पुर्याउन सक्ने भूमिका ज्यादै ठुलो छ। यसबारेमा अहिले मैले यो छोटो समयमा धेरै कुरा भन्नुभन्दा यसतर्फ अलिकति राम्रोसँग हामी सबैले ध्यान दिएर यसलाई यो निन्दा गर्ने, यो खराब छ भन्ने कुरा प्रमाणित गर्ने पट्टि भन्दा पनि प्रकृतिले वरदान स्वरूप दिएका यी उपहारहरूलाई, हाम्रा सम्पदाहरूलाई कसरी बढीभन्दा बढी सदुपयोग गर्न सकिन्छ र हामी हरेक दृष्टिले स्वस्थ र समृद्ध हुन सकिन्छ, त्यसका लागि यसले खेल्न सक्ने भूमिका ज्यादै महत्त्वपूर्ण भएकाले यसतर्फ रिसर्चको हिसाबले र क्वालिटीको हिसाबले हरेक दृष्टिले ध्यान दिनुपर्छ भन्दै
Thank you, Dr. Adhikari. Thank you very much.
माफी माग्दै र धन्यवाद, यसको लागि
Thank you very much
दिनु
for your
भएकोमा
thoughts.
धन्यवाद भन्दै आफ्ना बाणीहरू बन्द गर्छु।
Dr. Rajendra, few thoughts from your side. So we can quickly move, if time would allow, we will move towards questions because I have already received 8 questions from the audience side. We will move to that one after your thoughts.
Respected Chairman of the session, panelists, scientists, my dear friends, मैले नेपालीमा बोल्ने अनुमति मागे, छोटकरीमा बोल्छु, 3 मिनट जम्मा 3 मिनट बाँकी छ। नेपालको संविधानले भाग 3 मा स्वास्थ्य सम्बन्धी आधारभूत अधिकारको विषयमा कुरा गरेको छ भने भाग 4 मा जाँदाखेरि आयुर्वेद, परम्परागत चिकित्सा र होमियोप्याथीलाई चाहिँ स्ट्यान्डर्डाइज गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने विषयमा बोलेको हुनाले आजको सेसन पनि क्वालिटी कन्ट्रोल र ड्रगको स्ट्यान्डर्डाइजेसन र क्वालिटीसँग डिस्कसन भयो हुनाले मैले हर्बल मेडिसिनको सेक्टरमा बोल्ने प्रयास गर्दैछु। र छोटकरीमा भन्नुपर्दाखेरि अहिले भर्खरै अघिल्लो प्रस्तुतकर्ता डाक्टर मनिषले के भन्नुभयो भने 0.8 देखि 2.3 बिलियनसम्म एउटा मोलिक्युल, न्यू ड्रग मोलिक्युललाई बजारमा रिलिज गर्नसम्म खर्च हुन्छ भनेर जुन डाटा प्रस्तुत गर्नु भएको छ त्यो डाटालाई हेर्दाखेरि फ्याक्टर क्लियर छ। हामीले अहिलेको एटलिस्ट यो कन्डिसनमा नेपालमा न्यू ड्रग मोलिक्युलको ड्रग डिस्कभरी लाइनमा चाहिँ जाने अलिकति त्यति सजिलो छैन भन्ने क्लियरली देखिन्छ इन्भेस्टमेन्टको हिसाबले र अरू टेक्निकल इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरको हिसाबले एउटा छ भने अर्कोतिर हेर्दाखेरि आयुर्वेदिक औषधिहरूको कुरा गर्दा हामीले क्वालिटीको कुरा गर्छौँ र बेसिकल्ली एलोपेथिक ड्रगको चाहिँ मोलिक्युल सर्टिफाइड लेभलमा नै प्राप्त हुने र आयुर्वेदिकको कच्चा पदार्थको अहिले पनि नेपालमा जुन खपत हुन्छ त्यो चाहिँ सर्टिफाइड स्टेजमा प्राप्त भएको आयुर्वेदिक कम्पनीहरूले हामीलाई जानकारी दिएका छैनन्। अर्थात् छोटकरीमा भन्दाखेरि तिनीहरूको क्वालिटीको विषयमा चाहिँ नि र मेटेरियलको क्वालिटीको विषयमा एस्योरेन्स छैन र त्यसलाई कसरी रेगुलेट गर्ने, कसरी कन्ट्रोल गर्ने, नीति नियममा कसरी लिएर आउने भन्ने विषय आजको गम्भीर विषय जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई। त्यो विषयमा जस्तै WHO ले दिएका थुप्रै गाइडलाइनहरू छन्, जस्तै GAP, GCPका गाइडलाइनहरूलाई फलो गरेर हामीले एउटा स्ट्यान्डर्डाइज गर्न सक्यो भने अनि बल्ल त्यसबाट प्राप्त हुने र मेटेरियलको स्ट्यान्डर्ड पुग्छ र त्यसबाट बनेको औषधि चाहिँ नि बल्ल त्यो फार्माकोलोजिकल हिसाबले त्यसले काम गर्छ भन्ने हाम्रो चाहिँ नि अनुभव रह्यो। त्यसो हुनाले क्वालिटी स्ट्यान्डर्डाइजेसन गर्दाखेरि थुप्रै प्यारामिटरहरू हेर्न सकिन्छ। त्यो अहिले म डिटेलमा गइनँ त्यो विषयमा र मलाई आशा छ रेगुलेटरी अथोरिटीले त्यो विषयमा हरेक वर्ष प्रगति गर्दैछ र क्रमशः ती एनालाइटिकल टुलहरूलाई थप्दैछ। एन्टिमाइक्रोबियल हुँदै फिजिकल, केमिकल, पेस्टिसाइडल लगायत इभन बायोकेमिकल, फाइटोकेमिकल एनालाइसिस बिस्तारै आउने दिनहरूमा गर्दै लैजानेछ। नीति नियमले त्यसलाई रेगुलेट गर्नेछ भन्ने म आशा गर्दछु। र अर्को एउटा विषय मैले उठान गर्न खोजेको चाहिँ नि नेपालको यदि साँच्चीकै कच्चा पदार्थलाई आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिनमा प्रयोग हुने कच्चा पदार्थलाई स्ट्यान्डर्डाइज गर्ने हो भने नेपालमा तुरुन्तै एउटा नेसनल मेडिसिनल प्लान्ट बोर्ड गठन गर्न जरुरी छ, जसले हर्बल मेडिसिन अथवा मेडिसिनल प्लान्टलाई टोटल रेगुलेट गर्छ, त्यसको क्वालिटी चाहिँ एस्योर गर्छ। कल्टिभेसनदेखि अब जस्तै तपाईँले कुनै एउटा मेडिसिनल प्लान्ट लिनुभयो भने ट्रपिकल तराईमा पनि फल्छ, मध्य पहाडमा पनि फल्छ, माथि पनि फल्छ, तर डेफिनेटली त्यसको केमिस्ट्री फरक हुन्छ, फार्माकोलोजिकल इफेक्ट डिफरेन्सेस हुन्छ, त्यसमा हामी त्यसमा सहमत छौँ। त्यसो हुनाले त्यो सर्टिफिकेसन कसले गरिदिने र आयुर्वेदिक उत्पादनकर्ताले कुन चाहिँ कच्चा पदार्थ प्रयोग गर्दाखेरि कन्ज्युमरले जेन्युन मेडिसिन पाउँछ भनेर कसले सर्टिफाई गरिदिने भन्ने विषय चाहिँ नीतिगत हिसाबले आउने दिनहरूमा सम्बोधन गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने मेरो अनुभव रह्यो। र त्यसै गरी मेडिसिनल प्लान्टलाई सर्टिफिकेसन सिस्टम गरेर एउटा भरपर्दो स्रोत हामीले बनाउन सक्यौँ गभर्मेन्ट लेभलबाट ठाउँ ठाउँमा जहाँ कच्चा पदार्थ उत्पादन हुन्छ नेपालमा त्यो ठाउँमा चाहिँ नि गर्न सक्यौँ भने त्यो आउने दिनहरूमा पक्कै पनि लाभदायी हुनेछ, क्वालिटीको हिसाबले मैले कुरा गर्दैछु। त्यसै गरेर अर्को एउटा के छ भन्दाखेरि हरेक जुन उत्पादनकर्ताहरू हुनुहुन्छ उहाँहरूले क्लासिकल मेडिसिन बनाउनुहुन्छ र प्रोप्राइटरी मेडिसिन पनि बनाउनुहुन्छ। क्लासिकल मेडिसिनको फर्मुला एउटा स्ट्यान्डर्ड फर्मुला छ, तर किन हरेक ब्याचमा चाहिँ त्यो भेरिएसन आउँछ, कलरमा भेरिएसन आउँछ, एपिरेन्समा भेरिएसन आउँछ, टेस्टमा कुनै बिटर हुन्छ, कुनै एस्ट्रिन्जेन्ट हुन्छ, किन भेरिएसन हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि डेफिनेटली केमिस्ट्रीको कारणले हो। केमिस्ट्री चेन्ज हुने बित्तिकै फार्माकोलोजी चेन्ज हुन्छ अटोमेटिकल्ली। त्यसले गर्दा त्यहाँनिर जुन अहिले क्वालिटीको कुरा चलिराखेको छ, जुन चाहिँ नि हामीले अहिले सब स्ट्यान्डर्ड क्वालिटीको कुरा गर्दैछौँ, त्यो त्यहाँनिर जोडिन्छ भन्ने मेरो अनुभव रह्यो। र अर्को चाहिँ नि जस्तै कतिपय हेभी मेटलहरू पनि आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिनमा युज भइरहेको छ, तर हामीले यदि इन्टरनेसनल डाटाहरू हेऱ्यो भने आयुर्वेदले चाहिँ प्रयोग गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने मान्यता राख्दछ भने युएसएफडीएले चाहिँ नि होइन, कतिपय मेटल्सहरू चाहिँ नि स्वास्थ्यमा नकारात्मक असर पर्ने भएको हुनाले त्यसलाई बजेट गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने यो द्वन्द्व बिचमा पनि देखिन्छ। त्यसलाई हामीले एउटा स्ट्यान्डर्ड तरिकाले चाहिँ सम्बोधन गर्नुपर्छ नीतिगत हिसाबले। त्यसै गरेर अर्को चाहिँ नि के छ भन्दाखेरि नेपालमा प्याटेन्टेड प्रडक्ट दर्ता हुने त चलन चलिआएको छ। त्यसमा मेरो एउटा सानो धारणा के भने प्याटेन्टेड प्रडक्ट पनि कम्तीमा वैज्ञानिक हिसाबले सिद्ध हुन जरुरी छ, फार्माकोलोजिकल हिसाबले प्रुभ हुन जरुरी छ, सिद्ध हुन जरुरी छ। त्यसलाई रेगुलेटरी बडीले बिस्तारै नीतिमा ढाल्नेछ भन्ने आउने दिनहरूमा हामी आशा गरौँ। र अर्को चाहिँ नि मेटा एनालाइसिसबाट पनि कतिपय ड्रग फर्मुलेसन गर्ने सम्बन्धको हामीले सुनेका छौँ। त्यो चाहिँ नि प्रिक्लिनिकल डाटा एभिडेन्स जेनेरेट नगरिकन, मैले पर्टिकुलरली आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिनको कुरा गर्दैछु, प्रिक्लिनिकल डाटा एभिडेन्सहरू जेनेरेट नगरिकन एकैचोटि मेटा एनालाइसिसबाट प्रडक्टमा जाँदाखेरि त्यसले हुने पोसिबल लस चाहिँ नि हामीले ध्यान दिनुपर्छ भन्ने मेरो मान्यता रह्यो। त्यसै गरेर अनुसन्धानको क्षेत्रमा विश्वविद्यालयहरू थुप्रै लगानी गरेर इन्स्ट्रुमेन्टेसन मेसिनरिजहरू, ह्युमन रिसोर्स, ह्युमन क्यापिटलहरू लगानी गरेर बसेका छन्। उद्योगहरूले त्यो लगानी गर्न जरुरी छैन, रिसर्चलाई सिङ्गल च्यानल गरौँ भन्ने मेरो आग्रह हो। र अहिले भर्खरै नेपाल सरकारले थुप्रै आयुर्वेदिक औषधिहरू निःशुल्क रूपमा वितरण गरिराखेको छ। ती औषधिहरू साँच्चीकै गुणस्तरीयको हिसाबले के छ अवस्था भन्ने विषयमा अलिकति हामीले छलफल गर्नुपर्छ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई। र जाँदै अन्तिममा चाहिँ नि जिएमपी को विषयमा हामीले निकै छलफल गर्छौँ। आयुर्वेदिक प्रडक्टहरूमा कतिपयमा चाहिँ क्लासिकल मेथडबाटै प्रडक्सन गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ, तर अहिलेको जुन 21st सेन्चुरीको टेक्नोलोजी छ त्यो टेक्नोलोजी प्रयोग गरेर हामीले त्यसको टेक्नोलोजीको फाइदा लिएर आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिन बनायो भने डेफिनेटली त्यसबाट चाहिँ नि कन्ज्युमर बेनिफिट हुन्छ भन्ने मेरो मान्यता हो। यति भन्दै आउने दिनहरूमा नीति नियमले यी सबै समस्याहरूलाई सम्बोधन गर्न सके भने पक्कै पनि आयुर्वेदिक सेक्टरको मेडिसिन पनि भविष्य उज्जवल छ, जसरी एलोप्याथीको अगाडि बढ्दैछ। धन्यवाद। थ्याङ्क यू।
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra. I have, if time allows, we have like many questions. I'm sorry? You have questions here. Well, thank you very much, all the panelists. We have, many questions. So we will continue with the research and development because that's already in discussion. So if I ask this question to Prajul, to you maybe, because it's related to industry, that what sort of activities are being conducted in Nepal for research and development section of pharmaceutical industry. So being you representative of pharmaceutical industry, if you can quickly reflect upon that what sort of activities are already being done in Nepal pharmaceutical industry regarding to research and development. So that is question number one. And then if you can also reflect upon that, how much resources are being allocated when it comes to research and development under the pharmaceutical industry. So that's the question number 2. Are there any pharma industries in Nepal involved in developing candidate drug development process currently or near future? So these are the 3 questions. So I will, refer those 3 questions to you if you can quickly talk about that.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I just go to the answers directly. In case of research and development that the pharmaceutical industries has put in the effort is, I can say, very less, very few, very not so encouraging. The reason could be we are more focusing on developing more system and more different ways of more on a formulatory research kind of things, finished product kind of things. But we are not into the system that we study in the textbook, that drug invention, drug development, drug discovery. That is far beyond for my scope, to be honest. The reason is the basic pharmaceutical industries, I say basic pharmaceutical industries, are more on manufacturing branded generic products in Nepal. Started in late 1970s, where we started the first industries, where we started with only few products as the generic products. So in that context, we didn't have much of budget. We are more focusing on R&D, but that will be basically a formulatory lab where we try to discover newer system and delivery system, newer advantage in delivery system, where we can deliver newer techniques in existing molecules. So we are not into that budgetary fund that we have, where we can invest more of our money. For example, 10%, 20%, 30%, no, it is not like that. We are investing almost less than 10% of our budget in research and development, or as you can say, as a reinvestment for formulation grant. Where is the gap? Why it is so? It is because in other countries, in the neighboring countries, advanced countries, where government has taken step ahead, where research has been conducted. Government laboratories are in research. You can take an example of India. You can take example of any other developed countries where we can compare so clearly. There are almost 30, 35 agencies where they develop methods, where they develop molecules, where they also advance in Ayurveda, where they not promote, but they will invent, they formulate, and they hand over to the industry to manufacture in the regular basis. So this kind of provision is very, very required. When is only possible when we can think holistic approach. It is not that industry is making money. We are talking about phase 2, phase 3, clinical trial, CRO, research and development, drug discovery, but we are still struggling for the price of paracetamol. We are struggling for the price of paracetamol, which has been endorsed in laid back in a historical time, and now we are thinking about the discovery. My dear friend, that is not next to impossible. Next to impossible for us when we stand here and think about the discovery. I'm also a pharmacist. I'm also an academician. I'm also a chair of Nepal Pharmacy Council. But I'm sorry, my friends, this system will not help us to grow in research activity. So we have to reform on a policy level and think about the holistic approach where government could facilitate in promoting industries, in developing newer drugs in days to come. That is the only way we can join hands, and then industry will also start thinking that yes, it is a viable project, viable way to even we can invest some of the money in the research and development. First we have to survive, then we have to grow. That's why we say sustainable development and growth is always required for country's betterment. And we, Dr. Sarle भन्नुभयो जस्तै सुखी नेपाली समृद्ध नेपालीको लागि यो पनि एउटा ठुलो बेस हो where we have the largest import ratio in the rank of 7th on pharmaceutical. And we are having a lot of problem in that. So let's think about the basic, optimizing, standardizing, and sustaining, then we can grow further together for the betterment of the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prajul. So before I open the floor for question, from audience, there are questions. Before that, I will go with one question to Dr. Pan Bahadur Chaitri from you, and it is related to, and a very interesting question came online actually. Now we are talking about research and development and investing in regulatory system. So this question came by Mr. Ravi Shankar. I cannot pronounce the first name. My apologies for that one, but I'm pronouncing the middle and last name. So why does the Nepalese government invest so less in DDA? Why does the Nepali government invest so less in DDA? Can the DDA obtain user fee from the industry?
Either I have to ask to my minister or my secretary.
I knew that you're going to respond this way, so I have a second question which is associated with that.
I don't have the answer. No comment on this, please.
Yeah. So second question, which is related to like this: can the DDA obtain user fee from the industry? And the person is actually asking a question and giving an example. In the US, about 54% of 3.3 billion of FDA budget authorization, the remaining 46% of 2.8 billion is paid by industry user fee. The FDA budget is equivalent to 10.1 per American. So is there any plan or provision or that? Why? Because we are talking about so much coordination, collaboration between academia, industry, and regulatory, because these are the three pillars. It's also mentioned by Sudeep in his presentation that what can be done in order to generate those resources which are very much required to move forward with the research, to strengthen the regulatory side, to mitigate substandard and falsified medicine in Nepal, as well as to involve academia not to produce the strong, qualified human resource, but also participate in the research. What can be, is user fee a way forward, or, can be considered as one strategic direction? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Mr. Chair. Very sandarbhic, very relevant questions that you have raised. अब एकदमै चाहिँ जरुरी पनि हो हैन। अब अहिले के छ भन्देखि मैले चाहिँ रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्कमा हेर्दाखेरि अब औषधि व्यवस्था विभाग र चाहिँ राष्ट्रिय औषधि प्रयोगशालाको स्ट्रक्चर हेर्ने, ह्युमन रिसोर्सको हेर्ने हो भनेदेखि चाहिँ अब हामी त मतलब चाहिँ वी आर इन द जिरो लेभल भन्दा पनि हुन्छ है। अब यहाँ चाहिँ तपाईको चाहिँ जस्तो वी टक अबाउट द बीए एन्ड बीई, इट्स भेरी सिम्पल टु से but it's very difficult to execute, हैन? किनभने अब BAB is required, हैन? त्यो जरुरी पनि छ, तर चाहिँ त्यसको लागि चाहिँ चाहिने फ्यासिलिटिजहरु BAB गर्नको लागि त मतलब चाहिँ we must have a small set of hospitals. Do we have that? And we have we must have a lot of research center that त्यो BAB गर्ने चाहिँ सेन्टर चाहिँ धेरै हुनुपर्छ। इन्डियामा चाहिँ हामीले इफ यु टेक द एक्जाम्पल अफ द इन्डिया, द म्यानुफ्याक्चरर्स दे अब चाहिँ बिग हाउस, बिग म्यानुफ्याक्चरिङ हाउस, दे हेभ देयर वान दिस BNB सेन्टर आफ्नै छ उनीहरू। दे हेभ सेटअप स्मल टाइप अफ हस्पिटल्स। डु वी हेभ द्याट? अनि हामीसँग चाहिँ जुन चाहिँ सेन्टरहरू छ, even in the KU and in the IUM, is that are they functional? Have we that much of resources there? No, we don't have. त्यस्तै गरेर अब यो it's a very critical चाहिँ अब यो औषधिको पोलिसी या चाहिँ अब हाम्रो चाहिँ राष्ट्रिय औषधि नीति जुन चाहिँ 2051 को थियो, अहिले चाहिँ यो अब 2051 देखि अहिलेसम्म केही पनि भएको छैन हैन। इट इज लङ ब्याक। धेरै चाहिँ अब अहिले चाहिँ पानी चाहिँ धेरै चाहिँ बगिसकेको छ। हेल्थ चाहिँ औषधिको चाहिँ क्षेत्रमा चाहिँ धेरै चाहिँ पानी बगिसकेको छ, धेरै चाहिँ परिवर्तन भइसकेको छ। वेयर वी आर इन द 2051। ऐन कहाँ छ? वी आर स्टिल इन द 2045, 1978। वी आर द पिपल अफ द 1978। एन्ड वेयर शुड वी गो? हामी कहाँ जानुपर्ने थियो एन्ड वेयर वी आर नाउ भनेपछि अब यसलाई चाहिँ अब हामीले पनि एडभोकेसी गर्न नसकेका हो कि हामीले चाहिँ सरकारलाई चाहिँ बुझाउन नसकेका हो कि हाम्रो लिडरसिपमा चाहिँ कमजोरी हो कि देयर माइट बी द ग्याप त्यस कारण चाहिँ इट इज आवर रेस्पोन्सिबिलिटी इट इज आवर ड्युटी हामीले चाहिँ भन्न सक्नुपर्छ हाम्रो चाहिँ मलाई नेतृत्वदायीलाई नीति निर्माणकर्ताहरूलाई चाहिँ भन्न सक्नु पर्यो कि यो ड्रगको क्षेत्र औषधिको क्षेत्र चाहिँ बृहत भएर गइसकेको छ यसलाई चाहिँ हामीले कसरी चाहिँ रेगुलेट गर्ने चाहिँ इन्टरनेसनल सेनेटमा कहाँ र कहाँ पुगिसक्यो अब साँच्चै नै भन्यो भने हामीले चाहिँ पढ्दाखेरि जिएमपी भनेर चाहिँ भन्थ्यौँ होइन अब आउँदाखेरि अब त्यति लागु थिएन अब यो त पछि बिस्तारै बिस्तारै हुँदै गयो भनेपछि अब यसरी चाहिँ अब बाहिरको चाहिँ अब भनौँ न अब इन्डियाकै पनि चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ केसहरू भने नाउ द एनआरई इज दे आर नाउ बिङ फङ्सनल दे आर इन द म्याचुरिटी 3 वेयर वी आर इन द 1 हामी एकमा छौँ भनेपछि नाउ दे भनेपछि डिफ्रेन्ट भनेपछि एजेन्सिज युएसएआइडी पिक्युएम प्लस होइन दिज एजेन्सिज आर हेल्पिङ अस टु स्ट्रेन्थेन तर यसलाई पनि अझ हामीलाई चाहिँ यो संस्थाले चाहिँ यसरी चाहिँ हामीलाई चाहिँ सहयोग गरिरहेछ यसरी सपोर्ट गरिरहेछ टेक्निकल सपोर्ट गरिरहेछ भने हामीले त्यो कुरा चाहिँ वाइ वी आर नट एडभोकेटिङ वाइ वी आर नट कन्भेइङ दिस वाइ वी आर नट कम्युनिकेटिङ दिस एक्टिभिटिज टु द मिनिस्ट्री मैले चाहिँ देख्छु यहाँ हामी आफैले काम गरिरहेछौँ तर वी आर नट कम्युनिकेटिङ विथ द भनेपछि मिनिस्ट्री अनि जब चाहिँ मिनिस्ट्रीलाई तपाईँहरू एक्लैले काम गरिरहनु चाहिँ ठिकै छ त अनि ऊ पनि चुप लाएर बस्छ त्यस कारण हामीले जे गरिरहेछौँ द्याट सुड बी कम्युनिकेट विथ द हायर लेभल वी सुड नट बी कन्फाइन्ड विदिन आवर सेल्फ त्यसो गर्न सक्यो भने मात्रै देन वी क्यान हो यो चाहिँ जरुरी रहेछ हामीलाई थाहा छ नि होइन वी आर एक्जिक्युटिङ बडी वी आर एक्जिक्युटिङ द चाहिँ ड्रग एक्ट एन्ड पोलिसिज तर त्यो कुरा चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ मलाई चाहिँ नीति निर्माताकर्ताहरूलाई सचिवज्यूलाई मन्त्रीज्यूलाई चाहिँ हामीले किन चाहिँ कम्युनिकेट गर्न सकिरहेको छैनौँ द्याट वी हेभ टु डु ओके द्याट्स फाइन
Thank you. Do we have time for the questions or? You gave the other one. Okay. Okay. So it's a question from Dipesh Kanal. I would like to know if any cold chain breach for vaccine and products requiring refrigeration during transportation and storage is being monitored in Nepal. It significantly affects the safety and therapeutic effects of the formulation. Apart from the fraudulent medicine, this aspect may need to be considered as well. So I will refer this question to cold chain breach related again to you. Sorry, Mr. Panbal. Yes, because this is a question which probably regulatory would have to answer.
Actually, this is the question to the DDA.
Yeah. So, or Santosh left, otherwise I should have asked
those who are involved in the supply chain system.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, you are representing regulatory.
No,
regulatory aspects.
You must have invited the organizer must have have invited from the management division of the DOHS because they are handling the vaccines. Isn't it?
Yeah. I think like this, we will find the answer and probably this question. I don't know, maybe if a person has given its email address, so we will respond this question by that.
Okay, I'll respond it, no problem.
Thank you.
Oh, your chain break, you are talking about, you are asking about the chain break of the vaccine?
Yeah, during the supply chain of vaccine, if there any refrigeration, because you need cold chain.
Okay.
So if there is any break in the cold chain, because it has some effect, therapeutic adverse effects, if cold chain would break, the quality will be lost.
So, yes, so far I know that the most of the pharmacy, wholesalers and retailers, they are very much cautious about the this storage, cold chain maintenance of the these vaccines. And the drug regulatory, the DDA has already issued the notification to all for all hospitals, and whether it is a pharmacy, retailers, wholesalers, and most of the retailers, even in the wholesalers, if they don't have the refrigerator, they do not keep they do not sell, they do not store the vaccines. And so far in this government supply chain, there is a very fantastic cold chain maintenance there. From the manufacturer to the port, custom port, okay, and to the central warehouse, and to the these health facilities, and up to the recipients, that the cold chain is not breached, and cold chain is very much well maintained. And so far this pharmacy is concerned, those they don't have the refrigerator, they usually do not keep the vaccines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Balkrishna, you have something to contribute in this response?
I think it's more a supply chain issue. So for the regulators, obviously it's a scope of the regulatory to look after, to monitor the supply chain. So, you know, the COVID counterfeit vaccine or medicine, whatever, is as a result of the malfunctioning of the supply chain. So when the post-marketing surveillance or vigilance is not adequate enough, so this sort of thing can happen. So same is true with the vaccines. So vaccine are in the cold chain. So for the medicine also cold chain applies. So it's a matter of temperature. Vaccine requires 2 to 8 degrees, whereas medicines, room temperature or cool temperature. So cold chain applies to all the all the health products. I think it's a very much a regulatory agenda, and it's an agenda to curb the SF, substandard and falsified product. So the industry, I think whoever launched the product or whoever market, so not every products are originated from domestic manufacturer. So 50–60% of them are originated from abroad. So whoever launched the product, health products, whether industry or the importers or suppliers, they should run a scheme of pharmacovigilance. Without doing it, without them making or holding them responsible for the supply chain, so we cannot think of market free of SF. So SF will be always there. So if the industry, if the supplier who launched the product in the market are not conducting a regular pharmacovigilance and reporting it to the regulators annually, in case routinely annually, but in case of any detection, they should report as soon as possible. So these two things, I think, for the industry, right from the raw material sourcing to analytical development. I'm just relating it to SF because SF is a burning issue, really burning issue. So it must be from this conference, the message should be that SF is a very priority agenda. So most of the the quality control that is taking place at the moment is not adequately addressing the SF issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Balkrishna. Thank you very much. We need to wrap it up. I'm sorry, I have many questions from the floor, but in interest of time, we would have to wrap it up. So I will quickly summarize, and first I would like to pay my gratitude and thanks to chair, all panelists, esteemed audience, presenters, for their time and excellent presentation and thoughts, that they shared with everyone. So we all understood it today that the reforms are inevitable. They're in order to deal with all the issues, whether it is related to substandard and falsified medicine or related to research and development, bioavailability, bioequivalence. There is a high need at this point that we need to focus on pharmaceutical strategic reform. And these reforms are not possible, and a number of esteemed panelists, they expressed this, that these reforms are not possible until unless there is a strong collaboration, coordination, and resource sharing between academia, industry, and regulatory. Of course, there is a need to strengthen the regulatory system. Of course, there is a need to strengthen the quality control testing of national medicine or drug quality control laboratory. There is a need to focus on industry and consider them as a partner rather than someone who is being regulated. So they can not only meet the local market need, but also they can contribute into regional and global demand by adopting to the new formulations, investing in new technologies and innovations, and also they will be able to create the human resource opportunity on number of people who are coming out of the academia. There is a strong need highlighted by all the esteemed panelists on research and development, and again it goes without saying that its research and development is a key to continuously improve and or optimize not only pharmaceutical industry but academia and regulatory authorities, so they can prepare themselves to for the upcoming risk or upcoming need of the population. So once again, reflecting on all those discussions, there is a strong need for collaboration, coordination, and more resource allocation from all sides. And I think government is very well positioned and they can bring all these resources together and then can help them to develop a pharmaceutical strategy, whether you want to call it pharmaceutical manufacturing strategy, reform, innovation and growth strategy, whatever name you want to call it, just call it, but then tackle all these issues, bring opportunities and action plan. As my friend Prajwal said, that it's not only limited to the development of these documents, it also very much related to the implementation of those strategies. And what we have seen in the past, that number of strategies have been developed, but when it comes to implementation, there was always, we lag behind. So thank you very much, all the panelists, esteemed chair, my fellow presenters, organizer, Dr. Gewali, audiences, and with this, I hand over to the respected chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anur. Thank you, Anur. Before closing, I would like to request our NHRC Member Secretary, Dr. Gewali, for his few words.
हेलो, आजको यस कार्यक्रमलाई सेसनलाई चेयर गरिरहनुभएका चेयर प्रोफेसर डाक्टर पन्नालाल थापाज्यू, डीडीए का डीजी भरत भट्टराईज्यू, ड्यासमा उपस्थित विभिन्न संस्था, एकाडेमिक्स इन्स्टिट्युसनबाट पाल्नुभएका विभिन्न प्यानलिस्टज्यूहरू र आजका अडियन्सेस, पार्टिसिपेन्ट साथीहरू, एक्चुअली म धेरै त बस्न पाइनँ। अत्यन्त मलाई खुसी के लाग्यो भने जुन कन्सेप्टबाट हामीले यो आइडिया एक्सप्लोर गरेका थियौँ र सुरु गर्न खोजेका थियौँ, अघि निलमजीले भन्नुभयो कि नेपालमा फर्स्ट टाइम हामीले यो सुरु गर्दैछौँ। त्यसको लागि हामी सर्वप्रथम यो हामीलाई चाहिँ चेयर गरिदिएर प्यानलिस्टको आइदिएर विभिन्न महानुभावज्यूहरूलाई हामी विशेष धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छौँ, मेरो व्यक्तिगत तर्फबाट र नेपाल स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषद तर्फबाट। एटलिस्ट हामीले आज यो फोरममा विभिन्न अनलाइन माध्यमबाट देश विदेशबाट विभिन्न साथीहरू सुन्नु भएको छ, इन्टरनेसनल साइन्टिस्टले प्रेजेन्ट गर्नु भएको छ, हामीले कम्तीमा यो कुरा एक्सप्लोर गर्न पायौँ र हामीले यो कुराको सुरुवात गरेका छौँ भन्न चाहन्छु। नेपालमा रिसर्च एन्ड डेभलपमेन्टको चाहिँ हिसाबमा हामीले काम गरिरहँदा र अहिले हामी एनएचआरसीमा बसेर रिसर्च डेभलपमेन्टको पार्टमा चाहिँ हामीले थोरै ऐनका कुराहरू केलाइरहँदा आज के भन्नै पर्ने हुन्छ भने नेपालमा नेपाल स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषदको ऐनले दिएको निर्दिष्ट गरेको अधिकार अनुसार कि ल्याबोरेटरीसँग सम्बन्धित विषयगत दिशामा पोलिसी बनाउने रिसर्चसँग सम्बन्धित विषयमा र त्यस्तै गरी ल्याब बेसका रिसर्चहरू गर्ने भन्ने खालको उल्लेख भएको छ। प्रश्न चाहिँ ऐनले दिएको चाहिँ म्यान्डेटको आधारमा हामीले त्यो पार्टमा कति काम गर्न सकेका छौँ, हामी आज कुन लेभलमा छौँ भन्ने कुराको छलफल गर्नु जरुरी छ। पहिलो कुरा यहाँ भन्न चाहेँ। र आज यसरी रिसर्च डेभलपमेन्टको कुरा गरिरहँदा आज इन्स्टिट्युसन बेसमा हामीले कति सहकार्य गरेका छौँ, ऐनलाई टेकेर डिडिए लगायतका संस्थाहरू अथवा कोलाबोरेटर संस्थाहरूसँग हामीले पार्टनरसिप गरेर इन्डस्ट्री लेभलमा हामी पुगेर त्यसको R&D डिपार्टमेन्टलाई हामीले कति स्ट्रङ बनाएका छौँ, क्यापेसिटेट कति गरेका छौँ, त्यो क्वेसन पनि हो। यो आज चाहिँ थोरै छलफल चाहिँ हामीले गर्न सकेका छौँ। यसबाट केही निष्कर्ष निस्कन सक्छ हामीले विश्वास लिएका छौँ। र यहाँहरूलाई म के बताउँ भने रिसेन्टली हामीले नेपाल स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषदको इथिकल गाइडलाइन्स जुन रिभाइज 19 मा हामी बनिसकेका थियौँ र अहिले हामीले तत्कालै चाहिँ रिभाइज गरेर फाइनल गरिसकेका छौँ, बोर्डले पास गरिसकेको अवस्था छ। र त्यहाँ प्रश्न हामीले के उल्लेख गरेका छौँ भने कि अब नेपालमा ड्रग डेभलपमेन्ट अथवा कुनै पनि खालका चाहिँ तपाईँको डिस्कभरीको हिसाबले कुरा गर्ने भने अथवा चाहिँ तपाईँको डिभाइसका कुराहरू गर्ने भने ट्रायलका कुरा गर्ने भने हामीले अब प्री क्लिनिकल स्टडी, एनिमल स्टडी र क्लिनिकल ट्रायलका कुराहरू गर्नुपर्छ भनेर हामीले गाइडलाइनले निर्दिष्ट गरिसकेका छौँ। पास गरिसकेको अवस्था चाहिँ यहाँलाई म जानकारी गराउन चाहन्छु। हिजोका दिनसम्म नेपालमा डिभाइसको ट्रायल गर्ने भने तापनि कसरी जाने इथिकल हिसाबमा समस्या थियो। ड्रगको डेभलपमेन्टमा हामीले समस्या चाहिँ देखेका थियौँ र हामीले त्यो चाहिँ निराकरण गर्ने हिसाबमा पुगिसकेका छौँ र छिटै पब्लिस हुने चाहिँ यहाँले त्यो गाइडलाइन हेर्न सक्नुहुनेछ। अब मैले यहाँ के उल्लेख गर्न चाहन्छु भने अब नेपालमा पार्टनर कन्ट्री अथवा नेपालभित्रका इन्डस्ट्रीहरूले औषधिसँग सम्बन्धित अब हामी नेपालमै चाहिँ बनाउँछौँ भनेर कोसिस गर्दाखेरि नेपाल स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषदको इथिकल नर्म्सले चाहिँ हामीलाई त्यो खुला गरेको छ। यो भन्न चाहन्छु, यो हाम्रो लागि खुसी कुरा हो। र अब नेपाल सरकारका थुप्रै ऐनहरूमा थोरै समस्याहरू छन्, हामीले त्यसमा पनि छलफल गरेका छौँ। उद्योग मन्त्रालयसँग बसेर नेपालमा जतिखेर भ्याक्सिन बनाउने कि नबनाउने कुरा हुँदाखेरि थर्ड फेजको ट्रायल गर्ने कुरामा समस्या हामी देख्यौँ र हामी आफै चाहिँ तपाईँको लिडरसिप लिएर भ्याक्सिनको चाहिँ डेभलपमेन्टमा नेपाल सरकारले कस्तो नीति बनाउनुपर्छ, राज्यले के कस्ता छुटहरू दिनुपर्छ, ट्याक्सदेखि लिएर अन्य कुराहरूमा अथवा राज्यले उत्पादन गरेका वस्तुहरू कसरी किनिदिनुपर्छ भन्ने हिसाबमा एउटा गाइडलाइन चाहिँ ड्राफ्ट चाहिँ तयार गरेर यहाँहरूले सबैले देख्नु भएको छ, राजपत्रमा पनि आइसकेका छ कि क्याबिनेट एउटा पास भइसकेको अवस्था छ। भन्दा त्यस्तै गरी अब हामीले ड्रगको बारेमा पनि यस्तै गरी कुरा गर्न सक्यौँ भने हामी अगाडि बढ्न सक्छौँ भन्ने हिसाबमा पनि कुरा भइरहेको छ। यो जानकारी गराउन चाहन्छु। र यति कुरा गर्दाखेरि हामीले एउटा बुझ्नै पर्ने कुरा के छ भने नेपाल स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषदको चाहिँ तपाईँको ऐनले निर्दिष्ट गरेको चाहिँ तथ्यअनुसार हामीले काम गर्दा 4 डिफ्रेन्ट म्यान्डेट पाएका छौँ। यहाँलाई थाहा छँदैछ। क्यापेसिटी डेभलपमेन्टको हिसाबमा चाहिँ तपाईँको ट्रेनिङको पार्टमा हामी काम गरिरहेछौँ। त्यस्तै गरी इथिकल चाहिँ हिसाबले चाहिँ नेपालको स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषदको ऐनअनुसार 11 नम्बर बुदाले प्रष्ट रूपमा चाहिँ अध्ययन अनुसन्धान गर्दाखेरि पर्मिसन लिनुपर्छ भनेको छ र त्यसका शर्तहरू पनि राख्छ भनेको छ र यो पनि जानकारी गराउन चाहन्छु। र त्यस्तै गरी हामीले चाहिँ पब्लिकेसनका माध्यमबाट पनि हामी थुप्रै कुराहरू चाहिँ हामीले गरेका उत्पादनहरू चाहिँ बाहिर चाहिँ ल्याउन सक्छौँ, अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय मार्केटमा जान सक्छौँ। र जहिले पनि हामी रिसर्चको बारेमा के भन्ने गरेका छौँ भने यो फार्मास्युटिकल्समा लागू हुन्छ। एज म फार्माकुलको हिसाबले पनि हामीले भनिरहँदाखेरि के छ भने हामीले उत्पादन गरेका चाहिँ वस्तुहरू बजारमा बिक्नुपर्छ। बजारमा बिक्नुपर्छ त जनताको लागि उपयोगी हुनुपर्छ। र रिसर्चमा पनि ठ्याक्कै त्यही नै हो कि रिसर्चबाट प्राप्त भएका तथ्यहरू जनताको तपाईँको चाहिँ गएर जीवनस्तर उकास्नको लागि अथवा रिसर्चरको जीवनस्तर उकास्नको लागि त्यो एउटा चाहिँ माध्यम साध्य हुनुपर्छ। जबसम्म त्यो चाहिँ हुन सक्दैन तबसम्म नेपालमा ड्रग डेभलपमेन्ट अथवा होस् अथवा कुनै पनि रिसर्चहरू अगाडि बढ्दैन भन्ने चाहिँ सन्दर्भमा हामी कुरा गरिरहेको अवस्थामा यहाँनिर ठ्याक्कै जोडिन्छ। अब नेपालमा ऱ्यान्डमाइज क्लिनिकल ट्रायलका कुरा हामी आज किन नगर्ने? मैले हिजो के भनेको थिएँ भने म थोरै 2 मिनट टाइम लिएँ सर। कि हामीले के पनि भनिरहेको थिएँ भने मलाई के लाग्छ भने हामीले थुप्रै कोभिडसँग सम्बन्धित काम गर्दा मैले चाहिँ पोलिसीमा अन्त चाहिँ के भन्ने गरेको छु भने आज हामीले भ्याक्सिन बनाउनु पाएको भए त्यो किन नसोच्ने? आज पनि नसोच्ने भने कहिले सोच्ने? आज हामी सोच्यौँ भने 20 वर्षपछि त्यो खालको कुरामा हामी जान सक्छौँ भन्दाखेरि आज यो सोध्ने बेला भएको छ। अब हामीले के मनन गर्नुपर्छ भने कोभिड चाहिँ तपाईँको 19बाट हामीले पाठ सिक्नुपर्ने कुरामा नेपालमै उत्पादित भएका अथवा नेपालमै भएका चाहिँ आयुर्वेदिक मेडिसिन प्लान्टहरूबाट अब हामीले कम्पाउन्डिङ किन नगर्ने? हामीले बजारमा प्रतिस्पर्धा गर्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ मलाई अस्ति हामी MIT जाँदाखेरि केही साथीले के भन्नुभयो भने कि नेपालमा रिसर्च चाहिँ तपाईँको चाहिँ टिस्यु कल्चर ल्याबको हिसाबले व्यवस्था गरेर कम्पाउन्डिङसँग गर्नसम्म मात्र व्यवस्था गऱ्यो भने नेपालमा एन्टी क्यान्सर ड्रग बनाउन हामी कोलाबोरेसन गर्छौँ भनेर साथीले भनिरहनु भएको छ। भन्दा आज त्यस्ता खालका इन्डस्ट्रीको पार्टनर इन्डस्ट्रीका सरहरू पनि यहाँ हुनुहुन्छ कि हाम्रा केही क्वेसनहरू चाहिँ इन्डस्ट्री लेभलका अथवा पोलिसी मेकरसँग हामीले चाहिँ क्वेसनको हिसाबमा स्थापित गर्न खोजेका छौँ र क्वेसनको एन्सर खोज्नु जरुरी छ र त्यो क्वेसनहरू चाहिँ हामीले पुनः छलफल गर्ने चाहिँ हिसाबले चाहिँ ल्याउँछौँ। आज यहाँ कति छलफल भयो, मैले केही क्वेसनहरू बनाएको छु र आज डेभलपिङ पार्टनर PQM प्लसबाट आइरहनु भएको छ। क्लिनिकल रिसर्चको हिसाबमा चाहिँ गएर चाहिँ त इन्डियाको साइन्टिस्टहरू आइसक्नु भएको छ, डाक्टर महाजन, हामीले उहाँलाई धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छौँ। त्यस कारणले गर्दाखेरि त्यो खालको कुरा एडभोकेसी इन्ट्रेस्ट लेभलमा पनि पुगोस् भन्ने खालको हाम्रो मान्यता छ। मैले केही क्वेसनहरू चाहिँ राखेको छु, त्यसमा चाहिँ यहाँहरूलाई मैले पढेर सुनाउन चाहन्छु र यो क्वेसन आजै उत्तर दिनु जरुरी छैन, आज नेपालले यो उत्तर खोज्न जरुरी छ। त्यसको लागि हामीले यो अब चाहिँ यसपछिका कन्सल्टेटिभ मिटिङहरूमा यसको चाहिँ सुझावको साथसाथै यसलाई पनि लिएर जान पाए हुन्थ्यो भनेर मैले अफिसियली यहाँ भन्न चाहेँ। र यसमा के छ भन्दा what sorts of activities are being conducted in Nepal by the R&D section of pharmaceutical industries? Question number 2. Would you please share the fund proportion details allocated for R&D section? Number 3. Are there any pharma industries in Nepal involved in developing candidate drug development process currently or in near future? Number 4. How many medicines, including Ayurvedic product, have been patented in Nepal or abroad? Number 5. How can we link research, academia, and pharma industry? Number 6. What about the situation of bioavailability in blood and bioequivalence study in Nepal? Actually, Dr. Parveen had already presented nicely that, so we are going to conduct bioequivalence study center in Nepal in collaboration with DDA, but unfortunately, the process hasn't been started yet. We are seeking for the some collaborators like WHO, PQM Plus to start with, so that will be first time in Nepal. So number 7, what would be the immediate research priority areas for pharmaceutical research in Nepal? Number 8, why don't we have pharma industry in Karnali and Sudur Paschim province? So, but unfortunately, the two provinces in Nepal, they don't have any pharmaceutical industry in Nepal. These are the questions. मलाई के लाग्छ भने यी क्वेसन अथवा यस्ता खालका क्वेसनहरू अब हामीले बनाऊँ, अब छुटेका खालका कुराहरू छन् भने एक्चुअली हामीले कसरी जान सक्छौँ नेपाल स्वास्थ्य अनुसन्धान परिषद लिड गर्न तयार छ। हामी लिड गर्न तयार छौँ रिसर्च डेभलपमेन्टमा, नीतिगत नियमभन्दा बाहिर हामी जान सक्दैनौँ। समस्या छन् भने नीति पनि चेन्ज गरौँ, कोलाबोरेटिभ जाउँ। आजको दुनियाँ चाहिँ एक्लै काम गर्न सक्ने कुराहरू छैन। हामीले के भनिरहेछौँ भने हामी बाई ट्रेनिङ र बाई टेक्नोलोजी हामीले चाहिँ खोजिरहेछौँ। हामीलाई टेक्नोलोजी चाहिएको छ, केही ट्रेनिङ चाहिएको छ। हामी स्मार्ट हामी नै छौँ। हामीलाई थोरै खालको ट्रेन गरिदिनु पर्यो, त्यसको लागि नीति खुकुलो बनाइदिनु पर्यो। हामी यो सबै खालका विद्वत चाहिँ वर्गहरूमा म के अनुरोध गर्न चाहन्छु भने कोलाबोरेटिभ पार्टनरहरूमा कि त्यो पार्टमा चाहिँ नेपालमा काम गर्ने गरी नेपाल रिसर्च चाहिँ काउन्सिलले त्यो प्रायोरिटी एरियाभित्र रहेर R&D पार्टनर पनि छिराउँ यसलाई र अगाडि बढो भन्ने खालको मैले चाहिँ यो चाहना व्यक्त गरेँ र सुझावको हिसाबले जान चाहन्छु। एट द एन्ड, so I would like to just thank you to PQM Plus country manager, Mohammed Anwar, so for your nice presentation and comments. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Manish Mahajan. So he's a clinical scientist in the Zydus Cadila Pharmaceutical. So he presented nicely, and so thank you for his keen interest to work with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gaoli. अब हामीहरू एकदम अन्त्यमा आइसकेका छौँ। भोक लाग्यो होला, मलाई पनि लागेको छ। धेरै लामो नबोलिकन केही बाँकी छ कि म क्लोजिङ गरौँ? केही बाँकी छ? छैन नि, होइन? ओके। अब टेक होम मेसेज मैले बुझेको अब किवर्डमा मात्रै भन्ने कि लामो भइहाल्छ। हामीले पोलिसी रिफर्मको कुराहरू गऱ्यौँ, रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्कको रिभिजिट गर्नुपर्छ, चेन्ज गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा गऱ्यौँ, क्लिनिकल ट्रायल BA-B का कुराहरू ल्यायौँ, रिसर्च एन्ड डेभलपमेन्टमा फोकस गर्नुपर्छ एज अलवेज, त्यस्तो कुरा अगाडि ल्यायौँ। ह्युमन रिसोर्स इस्युजहरू चाहे त्यो एकाडेमिक फिल्डमा होस् चाहे त्यो प्र्याक्टिस फिल्डमा होस्, त्यसको कुराहरू हामीले डिस्कसन गऱ्यौँ। एकाडेमिया इन्डस्ट्री लिङ्केजको कुराहरू गऱ्यौँ र यसको साथसाथै सप्लाई चेन जुन सेन्सिटिभ मटेरियल्सहरू ट्राभल गर्नलाई सप्लाई चेनको इम्पोर्टेन्सको कुराहरू हामीले गऱ्यौँ। यो र सँगसँगै हाम्रो डाक्टर ग्यावाली NHRC को आदरणीय यो मेम्बर सेक्रेटरीले जुन क्वेसन थ्रो गरेर जानुभएको छ, त्यो चाहिँ नि हाम्रो इन्डस्ट्री रिप्रेजेन्टेटिभ्स, हामी एज वी इन द एकाडेमिया, के अरे रेगुलेटरी अफेयर्स, त्यो क्वेसन्सहरू चाहिँ लिएर we need to try to revisit on those questions. त्यो एउटा पार्ट हो. यो हुँदाहुँदै पनि मलाई चाहिँ के लाग्छ भने ignorance is bliss. यो बुझ्न आनन्द हुन्थ्यो कि केही नथाहा भए चाहिँ जति थाहा पाए त्यति टाउको दुख्छ हैन. आजको यो पनि त्यही नै हो. कहिलेकाहीँ इग्नोरेन्स हुन खोज्यो भने पनि अब यो 21st सेन्चुरीको उसले गर्दा गर्न नसकिने. अनि यो भन्दै पनि र अर्को इम्पोर्टेन्ट एस्पेक्ट चाहिँ नि प्रज्वलजङ पाण्डेले भन्नुभएको जस्तो हाम्रो यो टर्सरी लेभल फार्मेसी प्र्याक्टिसमा चाहिँ नि हामी पछाडि छौँ. स्पेसली इन्डस्ट्रियल एरियामा त टेक्नोलोजी पार्टमा हामीहरू नट ब्याड सेटिस्फ्याक्ट्री छ. तर यो क्लिनिकल सेटिङमा हस्पिटल सेटिङमा चाहिँ हामीले त्यति साह्रो काम गर्न सकेका छौँ. त्यही भएर यो इन्टर प्रोफेसनल कोलाबोरेसन टर्सरी लेभलमा काम गर्ने फार्मेसी प्र्याक्टिस त्यसको लागि चाहिँ काम गर्नुपर्ने छ. त यो भनिरहँदाखेरि कसले चाहिँ नि गर्ने त अब म जहिले पनि एउटा प्रश्न गर्छु, आफैलाई पनि गर्छु, तपाईँलाई पनि गर्छु. हामी फार्मास्युटिकलको मान्छे मात्रै बसेर भुक्ने होइन कि, हामी चाहिँ मल्टिडिसिप्लिनरी मान्छेहरू बिचमा बसेर झगडा गर्ने. बरु यसो फिजिकल के अरे स्ट्रेन्थ हेर्ने भने हेरे हुन्छ त्यसमा, मुकामुकी गरे हुन्छ. त्यो गऱ्यौँ भनेदेखि मात्रै हामीहरू टर्सरी लेभलमा जान सक्छौँ. किन हामी त हाम्रो कुरा हामीलाई थाहा छ, अरूलाई हामीले कन्भिन्स गर्नुपर्नेछ है. यस्तै कुराहरू जस्तो अब नेपालमा कस्तो भने अब हामीले यहाँ सबै रोजी कुरा मात्रै गऱ्यौँ आज. किनभने इन्क्लुडिङ माइसेल्फ मेनी अफ यु मेबी भन्ने प्रश्न के अरे राखेँ. थ्योरी अफ डुअलिजम हामी एक्जिस्टेन्सको लागि प्रयोग गर्छौँ. थ्योरी अफ डुअलिजम युनिभर्सिटी सेटिङको भावनाले हामी अलिकति यसो उटपटाङ थ्योरीहरू हामी भन्नुपर्ने हुन्छ. त्यही थ्योरी अफ डुअलिजमले नै हाम्रो प्रोडक्टिभिटी बढाएको छैन. योभन्दा बढी म एक्सप्लेन गर्दिनँ. एउटै इक्जाम्पल के दिन्छु भने हालसालै हामीले काठमाडौँ युनिभर्सिटीमा मल्टी डाइमेन्सनल क्यानाबिस रिसर्च सेन्टर खोलेका छौँ. अब हामी कति पछाडि रहेछौँ भने नि 1976 को एक्टले चाहिँ रिसर्चमा र मेडिकल युजको लागि प्रोहिबिसन गरेको छैन. त रेगुलेसन लेख्नुपर्ने हो, रेगुलेसन हामीले लेखेन छौँ. अहिले आएर अर्कै बाहिरको मान्छेले आएर होइन यसको चाहिँ नि यो इन्डस्ट्रियल प्लान्ट हो, क्यास क्रप हो, इलिगल्ली यसरी भइरहेको छ, यसलाई चाहिँ रेगुलेटरी फर्ममा गर्नुपर्छ भनेर बाहिरको मान्छेलाई आएर भन्ने कि हामीले नै हामी प्रोएक्टिभ हुनुपर्ने प्रोएक्टिभ हो. जबकि इलिगल्ली भइरहेकै छ, मान्छेहरूले त्यो क्यानाबिसको नामै लिन नचाहने. म चाहिँ क्यानाबिस भनेर रुचाउने हुनाले म आफै कोअर्डिनेटर छु. क्यानाबिस मल्टिडाइमेन्सनल हामी गर्दैछौँ. एप्लिकेसन गएर गृह मन्त्रालयमा अड्क्या छ. हामीलाई चाहिँ नि रेगुलेटेड फर्ममा डिफ्रेन्ट बायोडाइभर्सिटी एरियामा चाहिँ नि थोरै मात्रै भए पनि 500 बोट भए पनि प्लान्ट गर्न दिनुहोस् भन्ने हिसाबमा हामीले गरेको छ. त्यो अड्क्या छ, तर सायद यो बढ्छ होला. भन्न खोजेको के भन्दाखेरि हामीले चाहिँ नि बेलिङ क्याटलाई चाहिँ नि बेल लगाउने प्रयास गरिरहनुपर्छ. त्यो भने केही न केही हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा हो. र एनिवे थ्याङ्क यू हाम्रो प्यानलिस्टहरूलाई, मोडरेटरलाई र अडियन्सहरूलाई र के अरे अर्गनाइजरहरूलाई पनि धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद सहित यो सेसन यही क्लोज गर्छु. बाँकी चाहिँ हाम्रो एमसी नानीले गर्नुहुन्छ. थ्याङ्क यू भेरी मच.
Thank you, respected Chair, Professor Dr. Panna Thapa, sir, national and international speakers, moderator, and all the panelists of this session for such an interactive and fruitful discussion on pertinent issues in the pharmaceutical sector. Now, to wrap up this session, I would like to request our respected Chair, Professor Dr. Panna Thapa, sir, to hand over the token of love to all the panelists, moderator, and invited speakers of this session. Firstly, I would like to request Mr. Balkrishna Khakurel, sir, to receive the token of love. Professor Dr. Sam Mani Adhikari, sir, please receive the token of love. Mr. Pan Bahadur Chetri, sir. Mr. Prajwal Jang Pandey, sir. Dr. Rajni Sakya, ma'am. Dr. Rajendra Gewali, sir. Similarly, I request Mr. Mehmood Anwar, sir, to receive the token of love. Next, I request our respected chair to hand over the token of love to our invited speakers. Mr. Sudeep Pokhrel, sir. Mr. Achut Thapa, sir. Mr. Pradeep Lamsal. Dr. Praveen Prasad. I request Dr. Manish Mahajan, sir, please collect your token of love from NHRC when you visit Nepal. Thank you all the respected panelists, moderator, and invited speakers of this session for your valuable time. Now it's time for a group photo. Executive Chief of NHRC, Dr. Pradeep Gewali, sir, to present the token of love to our respected chair, Professor Dr. Panna Thapa, sir. Thank you very much, respected Chair, Professor Dr. Panna Thapa, sir, for your valuable time. We are now at the end of this session. We'll take a lunch break. Please enjoy your lunch and stay with us to the next session. Thank you all. Have a good day.